Hi everyone, Robin here, and this is a complete series of What If Larvitar joined Ash's team. Out of all the different Pokemon that people say Ash should have caught, Larvitar is personally the one I think goes for the most fun. Honestly, it just makes sense for her to capture it so much, but for some reason he just did it. But now we can finally put that to rest, and today I'm gonna show you the complete story of what would happen if Larvitar would have joined Ash's team, with some twist and turn that you may not see. So without further ado, let's dive in. So our story begins at the top of Mount Silver, where Ranger Mason is doing her regular recon. While the poacher that was there before has been dealt with, Mount Silver is still a renowned target for Pokemon poachers and thieves. While on the run, he actually ran into Larvitar again, which has started to get accustomed to her, but only her. The thing he had noticed on the run is that Larvitar became way much shyer than most Pokemon. The trauma of what happened while it was in the egg has severely impacted it and its ability to interact with other Pokemon. It seems only able to do this when its mother Tyranitar is nearby or right next to it. But that is unfortunately not a good interaction for a Pokemon at Larvitar's age. Ranger Mason wishes she is able to do something about it, but she's mainly here to protect the Pokemon in Mount Silver, not directly interact with their business. While being on one of her breaks, trying to figure out what she would do, she decided to turn on the TV, seeing if it would clear her mind for a bit. But the thing on screen is actually from the Silver Conference, where Ash is in his top 16 battle. Larvitar, who is happy to be nearby at the time, hangs seated and actually wishes he was watching it. Ranger Mason decides aloud to open the window so Larvitar can jump into the room watching the TV, and he sees Ash battling against his rival Gary O. Larvitar couldn't get his eyes off the screen for a single minute. He seemed to be completely enamored by it, being it for the interesting battle or it just being at the battle. Ranger Mason couldn't tell, but what she can tell is that Larvitar misses Ash. It was the one human that Larvitar seems to truly be able to connect with. While he is not gonna run to be scared around Ranger Mason anymore, he still have a tendency to harden up around other Pokemon and definitely the other Rangers. He realizes that he can't just let this stay as it is now, that something had to be done. So she decided to call in the Ranger headquarters, questioning about the situation and what she should be doing. After a bit of discussion, they come to the conclusion that the Pokemon's well-being is gonna be their number one priority. And while it may seem unconventional, if Larvitar's well-being is being away from Mount Silver and being close to the humans that helped it, then that it had to be what happened. Ranger makes understand what it means and decides to contact someone that lives close to where Ash's home is, none other than Professor Oak. After explaining the situation to her, Professor Oak explains that he's more than happy to have Larvitar and his mother if he will allow it and his ranch. He makes sure that they are well cared for, and there are plenty of Pokemon for Larvitar to interact with. While that is all good and jolly, there's still one Pokemon she needs to get permission for, and that's Tyranitar. Ranger Mason approached his Tyranitar, explaining the situation and that Larvitar trauma may be able to heal more effectively if it's closer to Ash. While Tyranitar is hesitant on leaving his home, he recognizes that this may just be what's best for his child, so they decide to agree to it, and with that, Ranger Mason started making the preparations for Larvitar and Tyranitar to have a little move. A while later, we then cut to Ash as he has returned to Pallet Town after his adventure in Johto, as well as reuniting with all his Pokemon at the ranch, and lastly, having a goodbye to his old rival Gary, who is currently deciding to embark on a journey to become a Pokemon professor. Ash has decided that his next journey is going to take him to the region of Hoenn, and he is about to rush back to his home and Oak's lab to tell his mom and Professor Oak about his plans. But once he gets to the lab again, Professor Oak explains that he actually has a surprise for Ash waiting in the ranch. Ash follows him, and when he gets to the ranch, he sees none other than Tyranitar. Being surprised by it, Ash then noticed the scar on Tyranitar, realizing that he knows this one. But before he can say anything, suddenly something appears behind him, and Ash, as well as Pikachu, is shocked to see none other than Larvitar jumping into the air and hugging Ash. Ash is confused by it, and Proto complained that with Larvitar trauma, the Ranger community had agreed that Larvitar and Tyranitar is allowed to stay in the ranch, and even allowing Larvitar to travel with Ash more, if that is what Larvitar so wishes, and it may just be what it needs to help improve. Ash looks at Larvitar, questioning if that is what it wants, and Larvitar nods in agreement. Ash then turns his head toward Tyranitar, asking if it's alright, and Tyranitar nods as well, gesturing that is what's best for his son, and as a mother, she wants to do whatever is best. So with that, Ash throws a Pokemon in the air, and Larvitar jumps up and taps it, being officially added to the team. Later that night, while Ash had dinner with his mom, Professor Oak, and Tracy, alongside Pikachu and Larvitar, who is over for a visit, Ash explained that he's gonna travel to their home region by only bringing Pikachu and Larvitar. He originally planned on only bringing Pikachu, but since Larvitar decided to come with him for now, he decided he wanted to spend more time with him, so we're going to bring him to the home region. Professor Oak approved of the idea, and Delia also gave Ash a new set of traveling clothes. And so, the following day, Ash set out on his new journey with Pikachu and Larvitar in tow. The following episode, Home and Alone, doesn't really change much from a story perspective. The only real difference I can see is that now when Team Rocket captured Pikachu, Ash can use Larvitar to battle them, but everything pretty much goes the same as they did in canon, with Pikachu still getting overloaded with electricity at the end. Things for most part continue onward in the next episode, with Pikachu still frying May's Spike, her becoming a new traveling companion, and even choosing Torchic as her starter. So pretty much everything stays on the canon course for a bit until we get to the episode 3 of the Advanced series, There is No Place Like Home. This is where Ash meets May's younger brother Max, as well as her parents, including her father Norman, who is the Pellberg gym leader. But since the gym battle is a 3-on-3, Ash cannot do it since he only has 2 Pokemon. Norman still agrees to having an unofficial match, being a 1-on-1, and he still ending up using Vigoroth, but Ash using Larvitar. Max is surprised seeing Larvitar, being a Pokemon he didn't even know Ash had. The battle immediately begins, however, it's clear that Vigoroth is far more experienced than Larvitar, as its speed and power is almost too much for Larvitar. However, Larvitar is able to pull back by using a combination of Screech and Dig to both destroy his Vigoroth and to quickly avoid attack while striking hard. However, in the end, Vigoroth is able to land a powerful scratch, which is too much, and Larvitar is taken down. Ash rushes over to it and complimented on a battle well fought, and Norman compliments that Larvitar definitely has spirit, but it definitely has a lot left to learn. Things from that point goes pretty much the same as canon, as when Ash leaves, both May and Max is accompanying him, and they next set off for Rustboro City. Episode 4 and Episode 5 goes pretty much the same way, and Ash stealing it and not catching Tailo, and Brock joining the team again, being a bit surprised to see Larvitar there, but being happy nonetheless. But then we have the next episode, A Poacher's Ego, which goes a bit different. When Larvitar learns there's a Pokemon hunt involved, it gets a bit scared, but also determined, not wanting another Pokemon to be put through the same fear it was put through. So Larvitar is more than happy to help looking for the poacher. However, none of them knows that Team Rocket are already with the poacher trying to free all the eggs and Coughing he had captured. However, in the midst of the battle, the poacher Pupitar evolves into Tyranitar. However, the roar is actually able to be heard by Larvitar. So he immediately rushes towards it, and with that, Ash, the gang, and Officer Jenny arrive at the scene, where they see Team Rocket constantly taking several Hyper Beams, with Ekans squeezing standing behind them with tears in their eyes. The gang's arrival alerts the poachers, as his focus is temporarily taken off Team Rocket, and immediately the battle immediately shifts towards them. However, with the teamwork of Pikachu, Larvitar, and Fortress, they are able to push back the poacher Tyranitar long enough for Officer Jenny to be able to arrest him. That's when Ash turned toward Team Rocket, questioning what they are doing here, without explaining that Weezing and Arbok didn't want to leave all these Ekans and Coughing, so they decided to help them out. Larvitar then approached all the Ekans and Coughing and explained that they do no longer have to be afraid, that Officer Jenny is going to take them to a place where they're going to be safe and happy. All of them agrees to it, and with nothing tying them back, Weezing and Arbok go with Jesse and James as they then run away because they realize there's a police nearby. So the episode ends with Ash and the gang has saved all these Pokemon, and a bit further away, James ended up catching Cacnea, since this doesn't really change the impact that James had on Cacnea. So he's still ending up hugging him and inevitably hurting him too. The following episode goes exactly the same, with Ash still ending up in adding Trico to the team. However, the following episode, A Tale with a Twist, actually has a way different output. Team Rocket still end up trying to capture the Viper, however, in a timeline when they still have Arbok and Weezing, and adding a new Pokemon Cacnea on the team, they are going overconfident and don't believe they need any traps or anything tricky to capturing it, and believe they can just getting it by defeating it. So with that, Jesse, James, and Meowth launch an all-out assault on the Viper, however it quickly proven to be too strong, as Cacnea quickly falls to a Poison Tail, and the combination of haste prevents Wobbuffet to effectively use counter, so he's taken down quickly. Weezing is also completely squished by a Wrap, So it ends its conversation between Survivor and Arbok, and both being serpent-like Pokemon, and this becomes some sort of rivalry between them, wanting to prove who's best. However, Survivor is far more brutal in his attacks and is able to get the upper hand, and in the end, Team Rocket is severely wounded as Survivor simply slithered away. And so, when Trico is ready for his rematch with Survivor, the game actually has to look around for it, but they're eventually finding it. And with that, Trico and Survivor had the rematch, and Trico still ending up winning. Yet as Survivor is about to try to get up, a net falls over it and the Team Rocket revealing they're attempting to capture Survivor again. However, a combination of Trico and Pikachu, they're able to freeze Survivor and eventually send Team Rocket blasting off again. However, when the game looked where Survivor was, it's now gone. Believing that Survivor simply left in the middle of the battle, the game continued on the journey, not knowing that someone is in the bushes spying on them. It revealed to be Survivor. Pretty much everything from this point goes according to canon, with Brock still not catching Lowtown, Meg getting inspired to do Pokemon content instead of gym battles, Pikachu starting to try to use Mastering Iron Tail, and May able to catch herself a runner ball. Eventually it's time for Ash to have his first gym battle in the home region against Roxanne. When the battle begins, they started off by sending out Geodude and Larvitar. Ash wanted to give Larvitar a taste of his ever first gym battle, decided to leave with it. Larvitar actually performed very well. Using a combination of Screech and Dig, he can easily destroy Geodude when getting close with a Mega Punch or Rollout, and striking back with super effective damage. As Geodude tries to use Rock Throw, Larvitar counters it with the power, cancelling it out. Eventually, Larvitar lands a decisive Dig, which takes out Geodude relatively easily. Her next Pokemon is Nosepass, and using a combination of Sandstorm and Rock Tomb, Nosepass is actually able to trap Larvitar before it can use Dig to get away. Launching another volley of Rock Tombs later, and Larvitar is eventually very weakened. I tried to allow Larvitar going for another Dig, however, Roxanne has Nosepass use a Sap Cannon aiming it down the hole. While the attack doesn't do damage, it's still able to produce enough force to force Larvitar out of the hole before another Rock Tomb knocks it out. Ash thanks Larvitar for his hard work and sends in Pikachu. And this matchup goes pretty much the same as it did in canon. However, with Pikachu being at full health now, it's actually able to take down Nosepass far quicker, meaning Ash now has his first gym badge in the home region. The following episode goes pretty much exactly as it did in canon, and now it's time for Ash to take on his second gym battle against Brawly, the fighting specialist. This matchup ended up going to exactly the same as it did in canon, with Ash leading with Tail Low against Brawly's mashup before falling, so Ash had to use Trico to finish mashup up. So Brawly went in with Makuhita, who evolved into Hariyama during the battle and quickly defeated Trico. While Ash lost just like in canon, this time around, the loss have a bit more of an importance to it. The first gym battle he had in Hoenn, he used his older Pokemon and he was able to win. But now he used his newer Pokemon and lost. Ash realizes that the gap between his older and newer Pokemon may be bigger than he originally thought. And not wanting to only rely on his older Pokemon, he decided from this point he's going to put into training his newer Pokemon while not neglecting his older one. The following adventure throughout Dewford Island goes pretty much exactly as it did in canon, with May's Wurmple evolving twice into Beautifly, Jesse's Wurmple also evolving twice into Dustox, Ash catching Corphish, Brock catching Mudkip, and eventually Ash is ready for his next match against Brawly. It started just like in canon with Masha vs Trico, but eventually Ash decided to switch out Trico, but this time around he sent in Tailo, believing it would be more meaningful to use the same Pokemon he lost to Brawly at first to prove that he does not have to rely on his older Pokemon. Tailo is able to get in with Quick Attack and Wing Attacks and is eventually able to take Mashop down. Next is Hariyama, and while Tailo is quick, Hariyama's power is not to mess around with, and in the end is able to land a knockoff which takes down Tailo. And so, Trico comes back in, and this match goes exactly the same as canon, and the final clash of Pound and Knockoff ending up with Trico winning and Ash getting his second gym badge. A few of the following episodes go pretty much as they did in canon. However, while May is practicing for her ever first Pokemon contest, Ash is doing some training with his own Pokemon when he's noticing that Corphish is apparently trying to dig into the sand and wondering if Corphish is trying to learn the move Dig. Seeing this, he had Larvitar showed Corphish to move, and at the time the contest rolls around, Corphish had completely mastered Dig. Things unfold just like they did in canon, with May still losing the contest and everything mostly following the same story, until we get to the gang reaching Marvel City where Ash will have his first gym battle against Watson. Watson started off by sending in Magnemite, but in this time, Ash actually sent in Corphish first, wanting to use his new Pokemon instead of falling back on his old ones. His friends and Watson is a bit surprised that Ash used a water type against an electric type, but the thing Watson don't know is that Corphish can hit the electric type for super effective damage with Dig. So whenever Magnemite tried to launch an electric type move like Thunder Wave, Corphish the Dig to avoid it and striking from below. Then when he tried to go for Swift, Corphish can be countered with a Bubble Beam, and in the end Corphish able to getting close with a Dig before landing a Crab Hammer knocking out Magnemite. However, before the battle can continue, Pikachu stopped breathing heavily. It was revealed that he has gotten overcharged by electricity caused by the gym's Raikou statue. Watson immediately brings Pikachu into a spare room when they have a device that can drain electric out of access electricity, and with that, Pikachu is healed. However, Watson still recommends taking Pikachu to the Pokemon Center right away, just in case. Ash does so, and Pikachu getting a quick heal at the Pokemon Center, and after a while, they return to the gym. However, now the question is, what are they gonna do about the battle? They can't just go back to it now after such a long break, but that is when Watson recommends that instead they do it a bit at a free battle, and the first one to win 2 one-on-one matches will win. Since Ash Corphish won against Watson Magnemite first, let's say that round ended in Ash's win. So if Ash managed to win one more round, he gets his badge. Ash agreed to it, and with that, the two of them send in their next Pokemon, Voltorb and Trico. As Trico tried to go in with speed with quick attack, Voltorb unleashed a Screech with destroying Trico before going in with a rollout. Trico's speed allowed it to avoid it for a while. However, rollout speed and power get built up so much, it's eventually able to strike. And with Voltorb also unleashing a couple of Screeches, it's able to stop Trico from moving around too much, and the after defense drop makes it rollout do even more, and eventually on a 4-hit rollout, Trico tried countering it with a spinning pound, but unfortunately this rollout is too much and Trico falls, meaning now the matchup is tied 1-1, and one more round will finish it off. With that, Watson in his final Pokemon Magneton. However, with Pikachu still recovering from its overcharge and Halo's weakness to electric, I only have one option left in Larvitar. Before immediately launching Swift, Larvitar countering it with a hidden power. The attack seems to be dead even, and Larvitar immediately goes for another dig, and is able to land, but then Magneton unleashes a Supersonic. The attack lands, causing Larvitar to be confused, which allows Magneton to fire off another switch with his. As Magneton rushes in with a tackle, Larvitar defends itself with a Harden, which is able to soften the blow before using a Screech, which actually caused the Magneton's metal to resonate with it, causing it to shake, which allows Larvitar to go into the ground and striking Magneton with a powerful dig before launching a hidden power, knocking out Magneton, meaning that Ash has won his first gym back, and with Pikachu now healed, the game can continue on their journey. The journey continues mostly the same as it did in canon, but when we reach the episode, let's Bagon with Bagons, because when the game meets Michelle, she actually wishes to battle Larvitar, seeing how both Bagon and Larvitar are first stage of the legendaries. Ash agrees, and the battle is fought into a standstill until Team Rocket interrupts them. However, after rescuing the day, Bagon evolves into Sheldon. However, just then, Larvitar also evolves into Pupitar. Ash is really happy about Larvitar's evolution, and Pupitar sees also to be happy of becoming stronger. However, the evolution is not the only surprise, because eventually, the game reunites with Misty again, and actually introduces the newly evolved Pupitar to her, and Misty is surprised not only in seeing Larvitar again, but he also have evolved. The events of the encounter with the Togepi and the Mirage Kingdom goes mostly the same as in canon. However, once Pupitar is into battle, it's apparently that things have changed. While Pupitar is able to demonstrate a newly learned move of Rock Slide, whenever the ninjas get trying to attack, Larvitar is trying his best to dodge. However, when he jumps out of the way, it's too slow, showing that while Pupitar is stronger than Larvitar, it's also slower. So throughout the adventure, Pupitar is starting to realize it not be able to move around as much as it did before, and he's getting a bit frustrated about it. When Ash sees it, he promises Pupitar that he's going to work hard in order to help it master his new form. From this point onward, the story mostly got the same, but Ash is working with Pupitar and trying to learn how to use his new form. Instead of moving on above ground, Pupitar instead decides to use his stick to actually move around the battlefield, and instead of avoiding it, it uses Harden to take them better before unleashing Rock Slide and Hidden Power from afar, forcing their opponents back. In the beginning, Larvitar has a bit of struggle with this, seeing how it doesn't really use this strategy before, but it eventually gets to do it a bit better. Other things go the same with Make Catch and Skitty, until we get to the episode Zig Zag Zangoose. At first, the story goes mostly as a midi-canon, when the game reunites Nikolai, who is a original like to the rest of a Pokemon. However, when Ash and Nikolai have a battle, and he sends out his Zangoose, Zangoose notices something in the bushes, and when he rushes into it, all of a sudden Team Rocket pops out, but following them is Zangoose, but also Seviper. The game is surprised seeing Seviper here again. However, when Seviper looks around, it actually spots Trico, and with that, it actually starts to ignore Zangoose and actually starts approaching Trico. The group is surprised seeing how Seviper and Zangoose are natural enemies, but with Meow there, it actually translates that ever since Seviper lost to Trico, it had been following Trico in order to improve and also getting a chance on a rematch. Zangoose gets frustrated about that though, thinking that it's going to battle Seviper. But Seviper said that he will take care of Zangoose after Trico. Decided to take the opportunity to Team Rocket suggests that it's Zangoose and Trico have a battle, and the winner gets to face Seviper. When Zangoose and Trico agree to it, eventually there's not much anything else can do, and so the battle between Trico and Zangoose begins, and both of them immediately charging in with speed. While Zangoose has the power, Trico's agility and smaller size allows him to quickly avoid Zangoose's attack, and is able to use Bullet Seed to attack from afar. Seviper is watching the battle though with intense fascination, not only at Zangoose's ferocity, but also at Trico's speed. During the battle, however, Meow decided to ask Seviper why he's so interested in Trico. Seviper claimed that while he was back home, he was the strongest, and no one could challenge it. But all of a sudden, this Trico just killed it and defeated it and just left. This will not stand for Seviper. He was not going to allow that. So, he decided to go all this way just to prove to Trico who's the truly strongest. Back to the battle, it all comes down to a final collision of a spinning pound from Trico and a crush claw from Zangoose. And in the end, Trico is the winner, meaning it's now time for Seviper's battle against Trico. But with Brock there, he insists that Trico gets a chance to rest. So with that, the group actually started to have some lunch. With the topic of how Seviper had been following Trico all this way, I'd actually compliment Seviper that it can appreciate his endurance and perseverance. Eventually, the battle between Seviper and Trico begins. The battle between the two immediately becomes one of speed. Seviper charging in with Bite and Poison Tail, while Trico using Quick Attack and Pound to striking hard. When Trico is that far back, he's actually able to fire off a Bullet Seed which hits Seviper, but just then Seviper reveals that he has not been laying low and actually charging in with a secret power. Not knowing what it does, Trico takes the hit but immediately falls asleep. Brock reveals that secret power actually has a secondary effect depending on when the battle takes place. And seeing how this battle took place on grass, it actually caused Trico to fall asleep. Ash just gets the Trico to wake up. However, it does not do so, so Seviper immediately charging in with a Poison Tail. The blow, however, is enough to wake up Trico, and Trico uses the momentum from the Poison Tail to deliver a spinning pound to Seviper's head. However, Seviper is able to take it this time around. So whenever Seviper tries going close with Poison Tail and Secret Power, Trico uses a Quick Attack to quickly dodge that away before striking quickly with Pound. Eventually, they have a final clash of Quick Attack and Secret Power, but in the end, both of them fall, resulting in a double knockout. While I rush over to them to see if they're okay, all of a sudden a net falls on both of them, revealing that Team Rocket decided to take the opportunity to capture the Viper and Trico as well. Fortunately, Team Rocket is quickly defeated and then blasting off, and in the meantime, Seviper and Trico are both put to rest in order to heal from their injuries. As they lay down, Seviper and Trico actually start talking, Trico respecting Seviper's strength, and Seviper also showing respect for Trico's speed. While the two talk, they even start to talking a bit about Ash. Eventually, both of them are healed, and it's time for Seviper to have his battle with Zangoose. As the battle immediately begins, Zangoose is using zigzag movement in order to orient Seviper, and eventually Seviper starting to grow tired. Just then, however, Ash actually cheers on Seviper in telling it to do his best. That encouragement is actually enough for the Viper, so when Sango tried to charge in with a finishing Crush Claw, the Viper quickly veers out of the way before striking with a Poison Tail, which delivers a critical blow, causing Sango to stagger back before Secret Power knocked down Zangoose. Ash cheers on the Viper, great winning, but when it was time for the Viper to leave, it actually stopped and stopped looking at Ash. Everyone being confused, but Brock realizes that maybe the Viper wanna go with Ash, asking if it's true, and the Viper nods before looking toward Trico, seeking to ask for permission. Trico is a bit surprised by it, but decides to not, respecting the Viper's strength and believing that having another Pokemon dedicated enough to follow him this far would be a good addition to the team. And so, after the Pokeball, and the Viper is officially added to the team. Everything from this point onward goes mostly the same as the canon, with May winning her first Pokemon contest, and our game finally reaching Larvitar, and it's time for Ash to have his next gym battle against Flannery. The battle is a 3-on-3, and just like in canon, the battle starts out with my cargo with Corphish. Just like in canon, Corphish is able to get the first win, and with Flannery in Slugma, Ash decides to rotate into the Viper. The Viper immediately launches into a flurry of attacks, striking hard with Poison Tail and Secret Power. But when Slugma lands at John, the Viper falls asleep, so Ash decides to rotate into Pikachu, who is able to finish it off, which leaves only Torkoal left. While Pikachu does his best, Torkoal's Iron Defense is very strong, and in the end Pikachu is taken down by an overheat. So Viper comes back in, and while it's asleep, it's able to take one overheat before waking up, before charging in with the Poison Tail, and while Torkoal is able to block with an Iron Defense, it tries to launch another overheat, but the Viper using haste to block its view allows it to get away before landing a Secret Power. Torkoal is able to take a hit though and launch another overheat, and the Viper is taken down. However, at this point, Overheat is weakened so much, so when Ash switches into Corvette again, Overheat barely does anything, so Corvette is able to fire a Bubble Beam, which is able to land, before shooting it with a Crab Hammer. Flannery tried that Torkoal go into a shell with an Iron Defense, but all of a sudden, it's paralyzed, revealing that the Secret Power words Survivor used earlier managed to paralyze it. And so, one Crab Hammer allowed Corvette to take Torkoal down, meaning Ash gets his 4th gym badge. After this, the journey continues toward Petalburg City, and everything goes mostly the same as the canon, with Ash eventually catching Torkoal in the Valley of Steel. However, here is where we're into a problem. Ash already has 6 Pokemon on his team, so he cannot just keep going now, because now he has 1 Pokemon too many. Eventually, he decides to send Tilo to the lab for a bit, so he can get some more bonding time with Torkoal, and keep on working with Pupitar. After that, things go just like they did in canon, with May getting another contest ribbon, Brock's Lotad evolving into Lombre, Trico evolving into Grovyle, and eventually the game reaches Petalburg City for Ash's 5th gym battle. Norman starts by leading with Slackoff, as Ash decides to go with Pupitar. Luckily for Ash, since Slackoff doesn't really move, Pupitar is able to attack freely by using Rock Slide, as well as using Dig, which allows it to move in closer. Slackoff doesn't really attempt to dodge, it's occasionally swaying to the side to avoid digs, but it doesn't really do much, so I decided to try going close with a Rock Slide. However, that is when Slackoff unleashes a Blizzard from a close, which severely hurt Pupitar, so I decided to switch in Torkoal. Just like in canon, Torkoal is able to defeat Slackoff before Vigor comes out and takes Torkoal down. I decided to send Pupitar back in as an archer to their first battle. However, Vigor's superior speed allows us to strike Pupitar multiple times. Eventually, I realized that he needs to play defensive and tell Pupitar to start using Harden. And eventually, he just keeps on doing that. Everyone is just confused. Even if Harden boosts defense enough, Vigor's raw power should be enough to push through eventually. After I keep encouraging Pupitar to keep using Harden, just then, something changed. Eventually, Pupitar gets so strong, and at that point, the protective layer around it actually seems to harden to metal. When Vigor strikes it, a claw actually breaks, revealing that Pupitar had learned Iron Defense. That move is such a shock that no one has time to register it, which allowed Ash to call on a power, and the move strikes Vigor off, knocking it out. Everyone is surprised by it, but Norman compliments that Pupitar definitely had grown since the last time he met. With that, Norman sends in his 5 Pokemon Slacking, which is able to take down Pupitar with an Earthquake. And so, Ash sends in Grovyle, and in the same canon, Grovyle is able to win, meaning Norman is defeated, and Ash gets his 5th gym badge. Once the battle is completed, Art decided he wanted to bring Taylor back for a bit, but when it comes to which Pokemon to send to the lab, Art decided to send Pupitar for now, thinking that Pupitar wanted to see his mother again and show how much they've grown and just spending some time together. After this, things pretty much unfold just like they did in canon, with May catching her Bulbasaur, Taylor evolving into Swallow, May Torchic evolving into Combustion, and Jay from Team Rocket also catching his Chimecho. And with all that out of the way, the game finally reached Fortree City, meaning it's time for Ash to take part in his 6th gym battle. The battle is a 3-on-3, and going with Ash's new approach on not relying on one Pokemon over another, he decided to lead this battle with Torkoal, and against we know that Altaria, this battle is vastly different. Other than trying to outspeed it like he did with Squirtle, he instead have Torkoal use Iron Defense whenever Altaria getting close, and counter Dragon Breath with Flamethrower. Eventually, Altaria tried to use Clone Ring to that, but that allowed Torkoal to jump up and deliver powerful body slams, which severely hurt Altaria. Eventually, Altaria gets weakened, so when he tried to go over Dragon Breath, Torkoal countered it with Overheat. The two moves collide, and Overheat wins in the end, and is able to take down Altaria, but Torkoal is exhausted. Next is Pelipper, and I decided to go in with Pikachu, and having trained his newer Pokemon to catch up with his old one, Pikachu in return have also leveled up a bit, so when the clash ends, Pikachu is still able to stand, meaning it's down to Renena's last Pokemon, Swallow. However, with Pikachu already exhausted, it won't be able to battle too long and eventually taken down with an air release. Next is Torkoal, and is able to use his Iron Defense and Flamethrower to hit Swallow for a bit. However, Swallow's speed and power is almost too much, and when it comes down to a clash of Overheat and Hyper Beam actually wins out and Torkoal falls. Next is Ash's final Pokemon, his own Swallow, and this matchup goes just like in canon, and in the end, Swallow managed to win, meaning Ash officially earned his 6th gym badge. The journey continued, and Ash decided to bring back Pupitar, while this time sending Torkoal to the lab. This doesn't really change anything at all, since things mostly goes the same as they did in canon, with May getting another contest ribbon, as well as the encounter with Team Magma and Team Aqua taking place. And at this point, we finally reached Mudtip City, where Ash will have his next gym battle against the double gym leader, Tate and Liza. This is the very first gym battle Ash is taking part of that is actually a double battle, and he decided to send in out his two Pokemon, Swallow and Viper. Tate and Liza, as well as Ashman, is a bit confused why Ash using Pokemon that literally have been resistant against Tate and Liza Pokemon, Solrock and Lunatone, but Ash explaining that he believes that the two of them have enough power and speed to be able to outmaneuver them. As the battle goes on, Solrock and Lunatone is moving in perfect sync, using a Light Ring to deflect attacks and using a powerful combination of Solar Beam and Ice Beam, severely weakening both Swallow and Viper. Swallow using a combination of double team combined with Viper's haste causes the cloud cover to allowing Swallow to charge in with the air relay, which is able to strike but is not doing too much damage. Eventually, Tate and Liza decide to focus all their power on Viper, but using its slender mobility, Viper is able to avoid it before jumping up on Lunatone using a bite. Hack is so decent damage, but just then, Lunatone fires from an ice beam striking Viper, knocking it down. Swallow tries to interfere, but Solrock keeps it at bay, so whenever Viper lands a bite, Lunatone quickly knocks it away with an ice beam. I tried that Viper using different attacks like Poison, Hail, and Secret Power, however, it does not go well, so eventually Viper continued to use a leading bite. In the meantime, Swallow tried to use a double team and early to knock down Solrock to help Viper, but Solrock is able to take them and strike him with Solar Beam, which forces Swallow back. Lunatone is about to finish off with another Ice Beam, but after Viper to give it all he has. So Viper is able to get up, and once Ice Beam's fire, Viper using its agile mobility to quickly avoiding it, but as Viper makes a leap in order to bite down on Lunatone, this time around, the teeth actually take on a green glow. So when it bites down, it not only injures Lunatone, but seems to actually heal up Viper. Surprising the group, but it appears that Viper have learned the move Giga Drain. Being excited about it, Ash decided to take the opportunity and has Swallow shot in with an air release on Lunatone as Viper lets go, striking it hard. And with that, Viper unleashes another Giga Drain, this time on Solrock, and started draining it of energy. Eventually, it shakes it off, and both Solrock and Lunatone fire off a combination of Ice Beam and Solar Beam. However, Swallow is able to use a double team to confuse them, which allows Viper and Swallow to charging in with another air release and bite. And so both of them falls, and Ash officially earned his 7th gym badge And with that, it's only one gym to go. At this point, Ash is starting going quite confident in his strategy. Seeing that how he had trained his newer Pokemon to catch up to his older ones has gone so well, he now believes he'd be able to take on anyone. That changed, however, when he runs into Elite Four member Drake, who challenged him to battle. When Drake sent in his Shellgun, Ash decided to send in Pupitar, both being second stage of pseudo legendaries, which doesn't really have much mobility. Pupitar starts by setting it up a rock slide and hidden power, as Shellgun protects them and charging in with Dragon Claw, which Pupitar blocks by using Iron Defense. While they're actually able to take the first Dragon Claw, it still does a lot of damage, so when Pupitar tries to fire off another ancient power, Shellgun countered with a flamethrower, which burns through it, striking Pupitar, knocking it out. When Raider sent in Alternate, I decided to go in with Pikachu. Using his small ability and powerful electric attack, is actually able to do a lot of damage on Altaria. However, it's still a Pokemon of an Elite Four member, and is unfortunately too much and is taken down. After the battle, Drayden walks up to Ash, telling Ash that his idea of using his older Pokemon to help training up his new ones is a good idea. However, they can only be as well as the trainers. So if his trainer starts growing overconfident in his ability, so will his Pokemon. Ash realizes this and promised that he will do better next time, and that when he battles Drake again, he'll be able to beat them. Drake smiles at that, complimenting that as a good mindset. Hope that Ash can actually back it up. Things from this point however doesn't really change, with May winning another content ribbon, Glow that evolved into Ludicolo, and lastly, Ash casting Snorunt, and he decided to set Pupitar to laugh a bit so he can have a bit more rest after all hard work he had done. And eventually the gang reached the top of the city, where Ash will have his final battle against Gym Leader Juan. This gym battle, however, is going to be way different than anyone Ash ever had. The first run is apparently a double battle, where Ash is allowed to use 5 of his Pokemon, while the gym leader only uses 2. If Ash manages to beat the 2 Pokemon, the match then goes into a second round, where Ash is allowed to use the remainder of his Pokemon, while Juan uses only 3. The battlefield will change between each round, so there will be a completely different battle depending on how Ash fights. When it comes to Pokemon Ash is gonna use, Ash wants to show that he does not need to rely on his older Pokemon, and decides in this battle, he is not going to use Pikachu or Pupitar, but Pokemon he has specifically caught here in the home region in order to show that they have grown just like much as he has. First up, as once in Celio and Seaking, Ash decided to start off with Corphish and Snorunt. The duo is actually very effective, as Celio and Ice Move doesn't affect either of them that well, and Celio's Torn is able to strike hard, however Corphish is able to use Crab Hammer to counter it. As Celio started to charge up Ice Balls, Ash decided to try something a little risky, and tell Corphish to use Dig in order to dig through the Ice Balls. He actually successful to do so, but the bigger the Ice Ball gets, the more time it takes and more energy Corphish has to do. When the third round breaks, Snorunt uses the platform in order to launch a powerful headbutt striking Seaking. While he staggers back, Seaking is able then to fire up on hybrid Mima close to take down Snorunt. With that added in his next Pokemon, Grovyle, and using a combination of Grovyle's quick mobility and jumping, and Corphish swimming, they are able to approach the two of them, and before they launch a double combination attack of Crab Hammer and Leaf Blade on Celio, knocking it out. And as Seaking is about to fire off on Hyper Beam, they are able to counter with both Bullet Seed and Bubble Beam. Their moves are even, allowing Grovyle to land a pound from above, knocking down Seaking. And with that, the third run is completed, and the battlefield changed to one that includes a bit more land. With that, Juanson in his next Pokemon loved it, and Ash decided to send in the Viper. However, it became a bit of a problem when Lovely lands a Sweet Kiss and using Water Gun to strike King Viper. However, Viper is eventually able to shake it off before using Bite to getting close, before using Giga Drain. The most surprising one, allowing Lovely's energy to be taken away before Viper launches it up in the air before striking with a poisoned heal, knocking Lovely's out. With that, Juan decides to send in his second to last Pokemon, Wishcash. And as the Viper is about to go in for another Giga Drain, Wishcash is able to catching it before using Tickle, before launching a Hyper Beam, knocking it out. Ash then decides to send in Swallow, and using its speed is able to keep away from Wishcash for a while as it's able to use Surf and Rock Smash to striking hard. Eventually, using a combination of Quick Attack and Air Release, Swallow is able to strike Wishcash, and before it does underwater, forcing it onto land, and one more Air Release knocked it out. However, Swallow is completely spent, so when Juan's final Pokemon Melodic appears, it only takes one Hydro Pump to knock it out. With that, Atchison ending his second to last Pokemon, Corphish, and the battle between the water types are even at first. However, while Mallow be able to use the recover in order to keep it healthy, they end striking with Twister, force the Corphish on the back foot. Eventually, Corphish is able to use Dig on the land part of the battlefield before using it from below on the water. Surprising one as the move strikes before Corphish is able to smack it with a crab hammer, but that's when Mallow uses an Iron Tail to knock it away before another Twister take Corphish out. With that, as it's down to one last Pokemon, as he sends out Grovyle. The ground type immediately rushing in with a quick attack and a leaf blade. As Mallory uses an Iron Tail, Grovyle able to use the speed of quick attack to get away before striking. This becomes Grovyle's strategy, using quick attack to get in close before striking with leaf blade, and when Mallory tries to counter with Twister or Iron Tail, he jumps back and fights off a bullet he hits from afar. As Mallory tries to use recovery to get himself healthy, being struck down by multiple grass type moves all being super effective, Mallory starts to run out of energy. So in the end, Mallory tried to put all his power into a Hydro Pump, but Grovyle able to avoid it before landing a spinning leaf blade which takes down Mallory. And with that, Astro officially won his 8th and final gym battle, making him now able to compete in the Hoenn League. After the battle, I decided to give both Grovyle and Corphish a bit of praise since they fought the hardest, bringing back both Pupitar and Torkoal. Other than that, everything goes the same as it did in canon, with me getting a final ribbon, catching mudslides, and participating in the Grand Festival, which all go the same as in canon, as well as Snorunt evolving into Glalie. Eventually, the game managed to reach Evergrande City, where Ash would participate in the Hoenn League. While there, he actually ran into some rivals. One is Morrison, which he met earlier, as well as a new rival in Tyson, with a Meowth wearing a hat and boots. When he contacted Professor Oak about what Pokemon he's going to use, Ash explains that he's only going to use the Pokemon he had caught and battled with here in the home region. Once again, adding on to the idea of that he doesn't want to rely on his older Pokemon while his newer Pokemon has worked so hard in order to get here. As for the battles, most of them go exactly the same as it did in canon, and when we get to the qualifying rounds, it's going to be 3 double battles, and 1 loss means you're out. Ash's first opponent uses a combination of Swallow and Tropius, while Ash decides to counter with Torkoal and Glalie. The battle goes pretty evenly at first, but when Tropius and Torkoal have their Overheat and Solar Beam clash, the training to catch Torkoal out with his older Pokemon pays off, because in the end, Torkoal is actually able to win that outcome. So in the end, Swallow against both Torkoal and Glalie, and the end falls, meaning Ash managed to move on, and is eventually able to pass through his second round battle relatively easily. Next, it was time for his third battle, where he's gonna take on Clark, who uses a duo of Charizard and Quilava. And for this, I decided to countering it with Swallow and Pupitar. While Quilava and Charizard have great coordination, Swallow's speed and Pupitar's defense is actually a great balance. And with the powerful Rock Slide, it actually keeps Charizard on their opposite side of the field, allowing Swallow to strike with several aerial aces, as Pupitar able to strike Quilava with a couple of digs. In the end, Quilava and Swallow able to land the combination with aerial ace and dig on Quilava, taking it out, before a Rock Slide traps Charizard, allowing Swallow to land a quick attack, taking it out as well. With that, Ash managed to move on to the final tournament, where his next opponent is against Katie, which he then learned is a very talented trainer using various strategies in order to disorient her opponents. For the most part, the battle goes mostly the same, with Ash still losing Torkoal, Pikachu, and Glalie, while Katie only loses to Trio and Mischievous. However, when the second round appeared on a water field, Katie go in with her Golduck, while Ash decided to go in with Seviper. Golduck Confusion and Hydro Punch are causing a lot of problems for Seviper. However, its slender mobility allows it to jump between platforms quite easily, and whenever it lands a bite, it can easily switch to Giga Drain, surprising Katie. However, when a Confusion eventually confuses Viper, Katie takes the opportunity to land a bunch of Fury Swipes, eventually knocking Viper into the water. Katie believed that she had now gotten down to 2 Pokemon, but just then, Atlas Viper to use Secret Power. And so, Viper rushes out of the water and strikes it, and being so caught off guard, Viper is also able to land a Poison Tail, which is able to strike a critical blow, knocking out Golduck. Next, Katie sends out her next Pokemon, Scizor, and with most of Viper's moves being either resistant or downright immune to it, so Viper really can't do much. The most he can do is using Giga Drain and Bite to strike it and occasionally get some health back, but it doesn't really do too much, and Scizor is eventually able to take down the Viper. Next, acting in Corphish and using the water field to his advantage, Corphish is able to go underwater and striking Scizor with Crab Hammer when he gets close. Katie tried to have Scizor go for distant attack, but Corphish is able to launch a Bubble Beam from below the water, and combining it with the water already there, it actually hits Scizor hard, knocking it to the water, allowing a follow-up Crab Hammer to take it out. Next is Venomoth, and again sticking to staying underwater, Venom tried to use Ingot Confusion in order to shake up the water. However, Corphish jumps up, and when it gets hit by Stun Spore, after Corphish used Crab Hammer on the water, creating rain which washes away the Stun Spore. That strategy catches Katie off guard again, allowing Corphish to land the Crab Hammer on Venomoth's wing, knocking it to one of the platforms before another Crab Hammer takes it out. Next comes Wall Rain, and its superior size allows it to easily take whatever Corphish uses before finishing up with a Body Slam. So the final matchup is between Volrain and Grovyle, and just like in canon, Grovyle is able to win, meaning Ash moves on. Now reaching the top 16, Ash eventually learned that his next matchup against Morrison, who is a bit worried about facing against his friend. So for the most part, this battle goes just like in canon, with Ash now changing his team from canon fight, eventually Ash getting to top 8, where his next opponent is none other than Tyson. For the most part, this battle goes just like in canon, with the first matchup being Sceptile and Glalie, and in a clash of Ice Beam and Solar Beam, it actually results in a double knockout. Next is Torkoal and Shiftry, and just like in canon, Torkoal is able to win. Next comes Hariyama, and thanks to its Thick Fat ability, it's actually able to take Torkoal's flamethrowers and overheat, and it's eventually able to take it down. Ash then decided to send in his next Pokemon, Swallow, and while this matchup goes just like in canon, since Corphish wasn't there to weaken Hariyama, Swallow is taking far more damage. But since Tyson had lost 3 of his Pokemon, the battlefield changed it to a rock field, and as Ash in Swallow again, Tyson counters with Donphan. While in canon, Swallow won this matchup, due to him being far more exhausted, this actually allowed Donphan to come out on top. Next is Grovyle, and having the type advantage, is able to take down Donphan, and then Tyson in his second to last Pokemon, Metagross. Just like in canon, Grovyle falls, and Atkinson in his next Pokemon, Pupitar. However, this battle immediately takes a shift. Anytime Pupitar tries to go for Dig, Metagross simply uses Psychic to force it out of the ground before striking with Meteor Matches, and while Pupitar tries to use Iron Defense to take it, it's still a tremendous amount of damage. Pupitar tries to fire off Hidden Power and Rock Slide, however, Hyper Beam quickly outpowers Hidden Power, and Psychic easily catches the rock before slamming it into Pupitar. Ash considers switching, however, Pupitar refused to move. Eventually, he continues to using Iron Defense to take any hit that Metagross gives out, and while it seems to do something, it unfortunately doesn't appear to be enough. However, the more Pupitar takes all the attack, it refuses to move. It refused to go down. Pupitar realizes that it had done that ever since it got to Hoenn, never standing down, always taking attacks. Back with the poster when it was a Larvitar in the Mirage Kingdom, the Pupitar in the Petalburg Gym, it always taking hit and serve as some sort of shield, a protector. That's what Pupitar realized. It's a protector because it doesn't want anyone to feel what it felt when it was just alone, afraid. It doesn't want anyone to feel like that. So no matter what in front of it, Pupitar is not going down. It will always stand tall, no matter what. That realization actually causes Pupitar to engulf blue light, and when it subsides, it is not the small Pupitar, but now stands a mighty and powerful Tyranitar. Everyone in the audience is shocked, but I can't be happy with Tyranitar's growth. A Tyranitar's talk, it releases a mighty roar, creating a swirling sandstorm to appear, revealing that a Sandstream ability has come up. Titan believes that would not be enough, telling Metagross to charge in with a Meteor Mash. While it does so, Tyranitar once again uses Iron Defense to easily be able to take in the blow. However, before Metagross pulls away, Tyranitar's teeth glows before lashing onto Metagross' arm with a fearsome crunch. Refusing to let go, and encourages Tyranitar to keep on using Crunch. Eventually, Metagross forces itself back before trying to fire up a Hyper Beam. However, Tyranitar goes for digging under battlefield, hitting Metagross from below. As Metagross tries to swing with the Meteor Mash, Tyranitar takes it once again, before landing a crunch right between his eyes. Metagrow wails his big arm trying to break free, but Tyrannosaur's grip gets stronger, and eventually Metagrow's limb stops, and when Tyrannosaurus lets it go, it's defeated, leaving Tyson only with one Pokemon left, Meowth. Immediately Meowth rushes in to attack Tyranitar. However, Tyranitar's strength allows it to take them. Iron Defense proving to block both Iron Tail and Slash effectively. However, by losing its ground typing, Thunderbolt is now an effective option. However, Tyranitar doesn't go down, so immediately launches a Rock Slide which stops Meowth for a bit, but eventually is able to get through, and as Tyranitar goes in for another crunch, Meowth is able to jump up in the air before landing an Iron Tail on the head. Unfortunately, that blow is enough, combined with the big damage, and Tyranitar falls. I returned it, telling it did an incredible job, before sending in his final Pokemon Pikachu out to the field. And with the damage it took from Tyranitar, plus the continued Sandstorm damage, when the two of them had their finishing Thunderbolt clash, it's Pikachu who stands victorious, meaning that Ash has officially defeated Tyson and moves on to the top 4. This is actually where Ash's official Hoenn journey came to an end, and we never saw any of Tyson's matchup after this point. However, it was later confirmed that he won the Everground Conference, and the fact that he had no shown to own any other 6 Pokemon, it's fair to say that he may have won the competition with the same 6 Pokemon he used in this battle. And with Ash having 2 more Pokemon, I believe I am safe to assume that this will be where Ash officially won his first ever Pokemon League. As a result, this causes Ash's Hoenn journey to continue for a little while longer. Ash spent the following days training his Pokemon, and a few days later, it's time for Ash to take on his first Elite Four member, Sydney. The battle is at 5-on-5. At first, it was a matchup between Sydney's Mariana and Ash's Corphish. I tried to Corphish charging him with the Crab Hammer and Dig. However, Mariana's using his speed and her mobility to quickly avoiding it before striking with a Sucker Punch. Corphish tried to use a Bubble Beam, however Mariana then unleashes a Shadow Ball which completely blows through it, with striking Corphish hard. Ash and Corphish go for another Dig, and Mariana is about to veer out of the way to go for another Sucker Punch. However, when Corphish hit the ground, he lashed onto Mariana's tail with a Vice Grip. This caused Mariana to yell and trying to lash away to get her off, but Corphish holds on tight and unleashes a Bubble Beam which hits Mariana in the back of his head. I think that Mariana won't be able to get away, but that when Sydney calls on an Iron Tail. The moose slams Corphish into the ground before Mariana unleashes another Shadow Ball, and Corphish is taken down. Next is the Viper, who using a Poison Tail is able to strike Mariana, but is able to get back up before launching another Sucker Punch. However, when he's about to move away, Mariana lashes onto it with a Bite before slamming into the ground and then striking with another Poison Tail, which is enough to take Mariana down. Sydney then sends in Sharpedo, and using Waterfall is able to zip around the battlefield, avoiding Viper's attack. But Viper is able to strike with a Secret Power, but that is when Sharpedo lashes onto Viper's tail with a crunch. Ash is surprised by it. However, that's when Sydney then Sharpedo to fling it away before shotting it in with an Ice Fit. I tried to Viper countering it with a Giga Drain, and while both moves lands, but once the Viper gets some health back, it is also getting frozen. With that, Sharpedo then launching into another Waterfall, but hits the Viper, knocking it out. Ash then starts to go with Pikachu, and using its speed and agility, is able to quickly avoid Sharpedo's attack before unleashing a devastating Thunder, taking out Sharpedo. Next is Cacturn, and using a combination of Needle to counter Iron Tail and Pin Missile to keep Pikachu away, Pikachu really doesn't have much option it can use. It does try to go in for a quick attack, however Cacturn takes it before landing a Needle Arm which severely hurt Pikachu before it unleashes a Feint Attack, taking it out. Ash then starts sending Torkoal, and Cacturn tries to go in for another Feint Attack, but Torkoal's Iron Defense takes it before it unleashes a Flamethrower which hits Cacturn hard, knocking it out. Next is Shiftry, and this one is way stronger than Tyson's. It's way quicker and strikes hard, unleashing a barrage of Bullet Seed and Shadow Ball, which hits Torkoal hard even when Iron Defense is up. Shiftry is about to rush in to deliver a finishing Feint Attack. However, Ash waits for it before unleashing an Overheat which pushes Shiftry back. The attack is not enough to take it out though, so when Shiftry gets up and tries to unleash another Bullet Seed, Torkoal is able to jump out of the way before striking with a Body Slam, knocking out Shiftry. Next is Absol, and with his superior speed, is able to quickly outmaneuver Torkoal and striking with a Slash, taking it out. Meaning Ash is now down to his last Pokemon Grovyle, and this match is a match of speed. A Slash and Leaf play clashing, Absol using Shadow Ball while Sceptile uses Bullet Seed. Both of them are using Quick Attack, striking each other hard. This matchup seems to be completely dead even. However, this is where Absol has a move that I was not expecting. Ice Beam. Grovyle dashes away quickly with a Quick Attack. However, their ice is eventually able to go to the battlefield, creating an icy field. Grovyle has a trouble moving around, while Absol's claws allows it to easily move around on the ice, striking with Slash. I need to do something. However, that's when he realized he can use this to his advantage. So when Absol tried to go in with a finishing Slash, at Grovyle to jump on the ice. The ice pillars that form their battlefield serve as small trees, allowing it to jump around like it was in the forest. This allows Grovyle to quickly move around the battlefield, striking with pounds from behind before charging straight up from the front and delivering a leap-like uppercut, which is enough to take down Absol. After winning, Ash can congratulate about all of his friends. However, there is no time for rest, since the battle is going to continue on from here, and in 2 days' time, he takes on his snake opponent, Phoebe. This battle is way different than before, since that battle started out with Sableye and Seviper. However, Sableye is not a direct attacker like Cindy's Pokemon, but is rather tricky, using Torment, which prevents Seviper from using the same move twice in a row, as well as letting Feint Attack and Shadow Balls, causing a lot of confusion for Ash. As Seviper tried to go for a bite, Sableye is easily able to avoid it before Phoebe decided to switch into Mischievous. Since the rules allow the Elite Four members to also switch their Pokemon out whenever they want. Immediately the trend continues, and Mischievous lands a confused on Seviper, confusing it before it getting hit by a powerful Psybeam. Severely weakens Seviper, while it's able to successfully land a Kick Drain, is not enough, and another Psybeam takes Seviper out. Phoebe then sends Sableye back in as Ash countered with Corphish. It immediately uses Torment again, however Ash has Corphish go for Dig, and then landing Crabhammer from below. It continues shifting between Dig and Crabhammer, which seem to be creating a little game of Whack-A-Mole. However, Sableye is able to use Feint Attack to counteract it, and even uses Foresight to successfully able to see where Corphish is on the ground before striking with Shadow Ball. Phoebe then switches into a new Pokemon, Bayonet, who successfully lands a Will-O-Wisp on Corphish, causing it to get burned before striking it hard with a Nightshade hit, and a fallout Feint Attack takes out Corphish. Phoebe then switches Sableye back in again, and Ash decides to counter with Glalie. This time around, Ash actually uses Double Team to confuse Sableye so he can't land the Torment. However, by using Foresight, it's able to see Glalie and then strikes with a Shadow Ball. Ash then decides to have Glalie use the Ice Beam, but Sableye is able to quickly avoid it. However, during another attempt of using Double Team, only to be countered by Foresight, Ash realized that he has a way of using that to his advantage. So he has Glalie continue using Ice Beam, but this time on the battlefield, creating several large ice pillars. This is confusing Phoebe for a bit, but as Glalie goes for another Double Team, Phoebe has Sableye use another Foresight. However, this time around, it actually hit the ice pillars, and the light reflects off of it, and bouncing between the pillars before hitting Sableye. This surprises her, but then Glalie go in for a spinning headbutt. And being now hit by Foresight, the normal attack actually works. So Sableye is completely caught and be slammed into an ice pillar before Glalie lands another Ice Beam, freezing into the pillar, completely defeated. Phoebe does it in a Mischievous again, and Glalie is able to use Ice Beam and Double Team to completely confuse it, not allowing it the chance to hit with Psybeam or Confuse Ray. However, when Glalie is close, Phoebe tells Mischievous to use Pain Split, surprising Ash that now both of them are seen to be at equal power. Realizing that could be an issue, Ash decides to Glalie to use Double Team all over to confuse Mischievous, before then using Headbutt on the ice pillar, creating a bunch of large ice rocks to slam into Mischievous. As it seems to be on the verge of his feet, Ash quickly calls for another Ice Beam, but Phoebe then calls him to use Grudge. While the attack landed into Mischievous, the attack seemed to affect Glalie somewhat, but Mischievous is then defeated. Next is Shedinya, and Ash tried to counter with an Ice Beam, however it doesn't work, revealing Grudge's effect or removing any ability to use the move that knocked out the opponent. Shedinya immediately charges in with a flurry of Fury Counters and Aerial Aces, but when Glalie tried to use Icy Wind, it actually passed right through it, revealing Shedinya's special ability, Wonder Guard, preventing any and all moves that aren't super effective to hit it. Eventually, Shedinja lands a return which is strong enough to take down Glalie, leaving Ash with only 2 Pokemon against Phoebe's 3. Refusing to give up, however, Atkinson in Swallow and using an air release is actually able to quickly outmaneuver Shedinja and actually take it out in one blow, revealing that in exchange for being only hit by super effective move, one attack is enough to take down Shedinja. Next, she then sends in Bayonet again and strikes with a Will-O-Wisp. However, that actually activates Swallow's guts. So as he strikes in to Sableye with a bunch of air release and peck, Bayonet does it best to try to counter with Feint Attack. However, the attack is clearly in Swallow's favor. Eventually, Bayonet calls on a Curse, with CV to weaken it a lot. However, Swallow is getting taken a lot of damage over time. Bayonet continues using his Feint Attack to counteract the air releases, and it seems why both Pokemon are on their last leg. However, both Curse and Burn is enough to eventually take down Swallow, leaving Ash with only 1 Pokemon left, Tyranitar. However, with the amount of damage that Bayonet had taken, Tyranitar is able to rush in and delivers a finishing crunch, knocking it out, meaning there is only 1 Pokemon left, Dusclops. This battle immediately becomes one of might and endurance, as Dusclops goes in for a flurry of Shadow Punches, Fire Punches. Tyranitar uses Iron Defense to take all the attacks before unleashing a Rock Slide which pushes Dusclops back. Eventually, Dusclops is able to land the Disable, which causes Tyranitar no longer able to use Iron Defense. However, Action shifts into using Dig, which allows it to go on the ground. Eventually, Dusclops has exhausted itself, so when Tyranitar rushes into a finishing crunch, it doesn't have enough energy to dodge, and Tyranitar takes the win, meaning Ash's next opponent is against the Ice-type specialist, Glacia. Glacia started out the battle by sending in Cast Form as actors in Torkoal. A bit surprised that he doesn't use the Ice-type, however, Glacia immediately calls on Hail, which transforms Cast Form into his snowy form. She immediately had Cast Form unleashed the Weather Ball at Torkoal counters with a Flamethrower. Cast Form tries to use Swift, however, Torkoal's Iron Defense blocks it before it unleashes a Body Slam, hitting it hard. Cast Form then goes for a Water Pulse, but Torkoal counters with a Flamethrower, seeming to be completely even. As Cast Form then launches another Weather Ball, Torkoal uses Iron Defense to take it before releasing another Flamethrower, which lands hard. At that moment, Glacier decides to switch out Cast Form and send in Palo Swan, immediately unleashing an Earthquake which hit Torkoal hard, forcing it to switch into Corphish. Palo Swan immediately goes into a Fury Attack, but Corphish is able to dodge it before landing a Crab Hammer. Mammoth Swan immediately then goes for an Ice Spear, but Corphish uses a Dig to dodge it, but Palo Swan forces it out again with an Earthquake. Palo Swan then launches an Ancient Power, but Corphish uses a Bubble Beam to stop it before it rushes in with another Crab Hammer. Acton decides to do something different and tell Corphish to use a bunch of digs. Glacier tried to use Earthquake to force it out, but Corvus jumped underground beforehand and unleashed the Bubble Beam. Eventually, the whole battlefield is covered in holes, and Corvus jumps out of them, launching Bubble Beam from all over. Eventually, Palo Swan gets too tired, and another Crab Hammer takes it out. Next comes Sneasel, and it immediately launches into a Fury Swipes, and Corvus tries to counter it with a Vice Grip. However, Sneasel is too fast and is able to strike it hard before it follows up with a Beat Up. The attack strikes Corphish multiple times, and lands another Metal Claw will take Corphish down. Next, action is Swiper, and the battle between them is a parallel power. They clash with Metal Claw and Poison Tails, Secret Power, and Fury Swipe. While needing to use Ice Beam to slow Swiper down, Swiper is able to use a Bite and Giga Drain to get some health back. Eventually, Sneasel goes in for another Beat Up, but Swiper knocks them all back with a Poison Tail before unleashing another one which strikes Sneasel hard, knocking it down. Glacier then sends Cast Form back in, and immediately launches into another Weather Ball, and this one hits Viper hard, forcing it back. While it tries to use Secret Power, Cast Form is able to launch it back with Swift before unleashing a Water Ball, which confuses the Viper. This is enough, however, and another Weather Ball takes it down. Atkinson in Pikachu, and using its speed, is able to use a quick attack to get behind Cast Form before striking it hard with an Iron Tail. The attack seems to be just enough, and they take down Cast Form, Glacier with only 2 Pokemon left. Next is Glalie, and Ash decided to switch into Torkoal once again. The battle between the two is merely a back and forth, with the continued clashing Ice Beam and Flamethrower ending up evenly. Glacier tries to have Glalie use Secret Power. However, Torkoal jumps out of the way and lands a Body Slam, but when Glalie goes in with a crunch, Torkoal counters with an Iron Defense. Torkoal then charges in with a Flamethrower, but Glalie uses Protect However, Ash tells Torkoal to keep at it with the flamethrower. The flame keeps on attacking in the protected sphere until they eventually crash, hitting Torkoal dead on. The direct hit is too much and Glalie falls, leaving Glacia with only one Pokemon left, Walrein. Torkoal is immediately exhausted, so one mighty surf from Walrein is enough to take it out. Next is Grovyle, and using its speed is able to hit Walrein hard. However, it's far stronger than Katie's, and its Blizzard is incredibly strong. Grovyle continuously to attack with Leaf Blade and Bullet Seed, which seemed to weaken Walrein a bit. However, when Grovyle tries to charge in with another Leaf Blade, Walrein then unleashes a Sheer Call. The move immediately hits Grovyle, and the power is enough to knock it out right away. With only one Pokemon left, Ash sends in Pikachu, and using its small stature, is able to avoid Walrein's attack, so allowed to get it close and deliver a point-blank thunder. The attack hit Walrein hard, giving Pikachu the chance to deliver an Iron Tail, which is enough to take down Walrein. With that, as they officially defeated 3 Elite Four members, right now the only one remaining is the Dragon user Drake. Drake looked onto Ash with approval. Impressed that Ash was able to come all this way, but said that he's not going to let Ash go off easy. Ash is perfectly fine with that, and with that, the battle immediately begins with Shelgon versus Tyranitar, a rematch of their last battle. Both of them are immediately on the defensive, while Shelgon uses Dragon Claw and Double Edge, which Tyranitar uses Eye Defense and Dig to counteract it. With Tyranitar launching in for Crunch, Shelgon is actually blocking it with Protect before unleashing a Rock Slide of his own. They go back and forth. However, the difference between their power is that one is fully evolved to a legendary, while only one is a second stage. And that power is enough, allowing Tyranitar to take the first win. Allowing Tyranitar to get a chance to rest, the next battle is Kingdra versus Swallow. While Kingdra is not on water right now, it still allows it to release a barrage of Ice Beam and Twisters, while Swallow dodges out with its speed. However, Kingdra uses a double beam confuses Swallow for a bit, allowing it to land a Hydro Pump from behind and knocking Swallow to the ground. While there, Kingdra immediately launches into an Ice Beam, freezing Swallow in place before unleashing a warning Twister, which hits Swallow dead on. Swallow does its best to get away, but unfortunately it's not enough and Swallow is taken down. Advanced in Grovyle, and using its speed and grass typing, is able to outpower Kingdra eventually, and when he tries to go for an Ice Beam, Grovyle simply jumps up and delivers a Bullet Seed from above, knocking out Kingdra. Next is Flygon. However, the Sandstorm was actually already set up from when Tyranitar did it, which allows Flygon to stay out of the way. It then delivers a barrage of Steel Wing and Crunch from in the cloud to prevent the Grovyle to attack it effectively. Eventually, it lands a Dragon Breath with paralyzing Grovyle before it releases a Dig, knocking it out. About this time, the Sandstorm had ended and Ashton in Glalie, and using his Ice typing, it's able to hit Flygon hard, and while it uses Steel Wing, it uses Double Team to avoid it before another Ice Beam knocked out Flygon. Next, Drake in Altaria, and that goes in with Pikachu, wanting also some payback from last time. The battle goes very similar to the previous match, however, Pikachu is far stronger this time, and using agility is able to jump on top of Altaria and deliver a close-range thunder, forcing Altaria to crash land before an Iron Tail is able to knock it down. This leaves Drake with only one Pokemon left, Salamence. After swap into Glalie again, and however, Salamance's power is outmatched, and one quick flamethrower forces Glalie to the ground, and while it lands another Ice Beam, it's not enough, and a Dragon Claw takes Glalie out. After switch into Tyranitar, and the match between Pseudos begin. Both of them attack. Salamence has speed and power, while Tyranitar has defense and endurance. However, in the match of power, experience also matters. So in the end, Salamence is able to use Fly to go high up before delivering a diving Dragon Claw, which takes out Tyranitar. With that, Pikachu as last Pokemon, and using it all power, is able to deliver some heavy hits. However, Salamence's power is not to scoff at. Eventually, it comes down to a final clash between Dragon Claw and Iron Tail. However, in a clash between physical power, size have a big matter. So in the end, Salamence is able to push through, knocking out Pikachu, meaning Elite Four run ends here. While disappointed, he can't help but being so proud of all of his Pokemon. They were able to get him to win his third league, and even got him to face 4 Elite Four members. He couldn't be happier, and Drake is proving Ash's attitude, telling Ash that if he continues like this, he will be able to go far. And with that, Ash, May, Brock, and Max are all heading home proud of their journey so far, but knowing that more journeys are up ahead. Before we dive into this part, I want to go over all of our Pokemon and go over the changes they have done. Due to the fact that Ash wished to catch his newer Pokemon up to his older ones, Ash's team has definitely grown stronger than their canon counterparts, and while Pikachu, Swellow, Grovyle, Torkoal, and Glalie are just stronger, Corphish, Seviper, and Tyranitar have definitely grown stronger and even learned a couple of new moves. For example, Corphish still has Crab Hammer, Bubble Beam, and Vice Grip, but also have a new move in Dig. Next is Seviper. While it's retaining Poison Tail and Bite, it also learns Secret Power and Giga Drain. Tyranitar has gotten the most changes, with still learning Dig from when it was still Larvitar, while its Hardened has evolved into the tougher Iron Defense, and even learning Rock Slide and Crunch upon evolution. But with this out of the way, let's dive into the story. Our journey continues onward with Ash and Brock going back to Kanto, while May and Meg returning to Petalburg City. There's a heartfelt reunion as our group finally split off, and back in Kanto, Ash and Brock also say goodbye to return to their own home. Things mostly go to Canada, however, we're being days later because of his competition in the Elite Four Challenge, and does not arrive at the same time as Scott, meaning he does not meet him in Viridian City or take on Agatha in a battle. With that, he returned to Pallet Town, where he meets his mother and reunites all of his Pokemon, and let his newer Pokemon get more accustomed to his older. We even getting a heartful reunion at Tyranitar Arena with his mother, as the mother can see that Tyranitar truly had grown. However, two notable changes take place here. One is that Misty is not there when Ash shows up, because her vacation day would have ended up, and she does not wish her sister to ruin the gym while she's away. At the same time, Scott decides to arrive in Palatine in person to personally invite Ash to take part in the Battle Frontier. Upon seeing how Ash took on 4 Elite Four members, only losing to Drain, he believed Ash had what it takes. And once he learned what a Battle Frontier is, Ash is more than on board. However, he does not embark on this journey on his own, because in the lab also appears May and Max. Max having a comedy Professor Birch that decide to visit, and May wishing to take part in the contest in Kanto. Eventually, they decide to once again travel together, with some surprises, with May even getting a Squirtle from Blizzard Oak, which is quite shy, as well as Ash deciding to leave some of his newer Pokemon at the lab, with those being Torkoal, Glalie, and Tyranitar, but to his surprise, he even gets joined by an old friend from Johto, Vampy. The following day, as the gang is about to embark, Brock surprises them and actually said that he cannot journey without him. And with that, a group of trainers once again embarks on their journey. Tyranitar time at the lab mainly start with him reuniting with the theme of Johto Pokemon, since those are the ones he actually knew, but also getting some acquaintance with Ash's old Kanto Pokemon. However, the one Pokemon he's getting a good friendship with is none other than Bulbasaur. Seeing how Bulbasaur serves the ambassador of the ranch, Tyranitar actually accompanies Bulbasaur on his daily runs, and the two of them form an interesting partnership. While Bulbasaur is great with words, when it comes to Pokemon that has big pride, sometimes a bit of force is necessary. So that is what Tyranitar comes in, serving as the unblockable tank as it is, taking any attack the problem it causes it before striking back with force, making them listening to both it and Bulbasaur. The two of them serving both as a great way to keep track of the ranch, being both brain and brawn. On Ash's front, however, things doesn't really change with Frontier battle for the most part. The battle with Nolan is still Charizard versus Articuno, with Charizard eventually able to win against Gerda, and still with Grovyle against Hariyama. However, with the amount of training Grovyle got in, is actually strong enough to win against Hariyama, only falling to Medicham, meaning Snorlax comes in and finishes it off. Next, against Tucker, he still using a combination of Corphish and Swallow against Arcanine and Swampert, and the two of them were able to win against the two, meaning Ash gets free of his symbol just like in canon. It is at this point that Vampy also evolves into Donphan, and Ash eventually has his next frontier battle against Pike Queen Lucy. However, when Lucy sent in her Seviper, Ash decided to counter with his Seviper. The two Seviper then have a mirror match, both catching Poison Tail and Bind, while Lucy's Seviper uses a Flamethrower is good at distance. Seviper's Secret Power and Giga Drain help it when it's up close. However, with Giga Drain's able to drain health, that gives it just enough so he's able to outlet Lucy's Viper, meaning Melody comes in and Viper latches onto it using another Giga Drain to get some health back. When Lucy tries to have Melody use a Hydro Pump, Viper is able to jump into the water to avoid it before jumping back out and striking with a Secret Power. Melody is able to get away from it. However, For it cannot avoid a fall of Poison Tail, which strikes but also poisons Milotic. I believe now Survivor has it in the bag, but then Lucy caught on Facade will take down Survivor in a finishing blow. While Milotic is powerful, the poison slowly chips away at his health. When Atkinson in Dawnfen, it uses a roll like he's at a distance, so when Milotic is pretty much out of health, it runs in first headfirst with the roller as Lucy countered with Facade. The two moves collide in the middle of the stadium, but when it ends, Milotic gets fallen, meaning Ash gets his 4 Frontier symbol. Following this, just like in canon, Grovyle also evolved into Sceptile, going through a quick heartbreak where he cannot use any moves, but thanks to some encouragement from Spencer of the Battle Palace, Survivor is able to get his moves back in just in time for Ash's 5th Frontier battle. This match is pretty much exactly just like in canon, with them leading with Shifty and Sceptile, with Sceptile winning, then follow a match with Heracross and Venusaur, where Venusaur wins, then Ash going to Swallow, we take down Venusaur, followed by Kaleido, we take down Swallow, and then in the last match with Kaleido and Sceptile is able to learn Solar Beam to finish it off. Things at that point had gone well, and eventually Ash gets to the Battle Tower when he gets take on Annabelle, and he decided to call Tyranitar back, and when it appears, it looks around seeing all of its friends and seeing how well they grow. Surprised seeing Sept and Thompson have evolved, but he's happy to see them again. And with that, the battle between Ash and Annabelle begins, with them both leading with Corfish and Alakazam getting a cannon, with Alakazam taking the win. Ash then goes with Tyranitar, however, be able to tell her Pokemon what to do without actually saying anything gives Annabelle the advantage. However, Tyranitar just eyeing the thing, keep it healthy enough, so when it delivers a finishing crunch, it is able to take down Alakazam. Like its Metagross, and the two of them has a head-to-head clash, both striking with everything they have. But in the end, Annabelle is just too good, and Tyranitar eventually falls, meaning the only Pokemon left is Pikachu. However, Tyranitar done such a great job, so eventually Pikachu is able to take down Metagross by taking a couple of hits. With that, Annabelle is in our final Pokemon, Espeon. However, with Pikachu taking damage already, it's unfortunately not enough, and Espeon is to take out Pikachu, meaning Ash lost his first Frontier battle. However, Ash is determined to win, so he spent the following day training with all of his Pokemon, and eventually he was ready to take on Annabelle in a rematch. The matchup begins just like canon with Corfish and Alakazam, and the battle mostly goes the same like before, with Alakazam even able to confusing Corfish. However, with Ash's encouragement, as well as all his training has done to catch out Ash's more experienced Pokemon, it gives Corfish the push it needed to evolve into Crawdaunt. With that, it's not on confusion, and even Ali uses a new move, Knock Off. This actually knocks away Alakazam's boost, preventing it from stabilizing its psychic ability, allowing it then to land on Uppercut Crab Hammer, which takes down Alakazam. Next is Metagross, and Crawdaunt strikes with multiple knockoffs. However, Metagross' strength allows it to take it before finishing Crawdaunt off with an Hyper Beam. Next is Tyranitar, and using its power, it allows it to take any of the hits, and opposite from first time, when the does end, a Tyranitar who stands victorious. Next is Espeon again, and with Espeon's speed and the use of Sap Cannon, it's unfortunately enough to take down Tyranitar. However, with the effort he put in, Pikachu is able to come in and finish down Espeon with a Thunderbolt. Meaning at this point, Ash gotten 6 of his Frontier symbols, meaning he still have 1 left in order to complete the Battle Frontier. I decided to keep Tyranitar around for a bit, and it showed to help in various ways, such as when they can encounter the Arctic, Tyranitar's stature as a Suran Legendary, as well as the Dark types, allows them to keep the Arctic at bay, made to eventually resolve the conflict. However, after May's final contest, seeing how they are close to Mount Silver, Ash approached the game with an idea of visiting Mount Silver as well as Tyranitar's home. The gang agrees to it, and with that, the gang travel towards Mount Silver, where they reach Ranger Mason again, where she's surprised seeing Tyranitar fully evolved now, where it's happy to see it did so well. So while watching over Tyranitar's home, as well as stopping Team Rocket from fleeing Pokemon there, the gang eventually continues onward to the final battle facility, the Battle Pyramid. However, this is where we get a shift, since they coming from Mount Silver and not Pewter City, this changes the route they take, so they do not stumble onto ruins, meaning Ash is not possessed by the spirit of the former king. So when Ash gets to the pyramid, he gets to wait for a bit, but eventually Brandon comes and Ash is allowed to take on his Frontier battle. Just like in canon, Brandon in Regirock, but since he's not possessed, Ash is able to use Sceptile, and knowing his Pokemon best, they're able to perform way better than the King of Pontiac did, since he only used raw power, but Ash used his Sceptile natural speed to keep at a distance while attacking with quick hit and run leaf blades. Regirock uses Lock Gun and Hyper Beam is difficult at first, however, Sceptile and Ash refuse to give up, however, and they are able to push through, but in the end, they are still not enough, and Regirock is able to take the win. Brandon compliments Ash on his performance, but said that he needs to train even harder if he's ever going to face him again. And with that, things goes just like they did in Canon, with May competing in the Candle Grand Festival, and Ash as well catching A-Pop. May's performance goes just like in Canon, and eventually, our game reaches Fennel Valley, where Ash will once again have a chance to take on Brandon. Just like in Canon, Brandon goes with Registeel, Ash uses Torkoal, and the two of them have a hit clash like in Canon, but even with Torkoal's new learned Heatwave, it's not enough, and Registeel is taking the win. So Ash decides to take some time and eventually reunite with some old friends. So with that, when Brandon returns, they once again take on their 4-on-4 battle. And things mostly just goes like they did in Canon, with the final matchup being Brandon's newly caught Reggie Eyes versus Pikachu. And after unleashing his recently learned Volt Tackle, is able to get the win, and Ash has officially conquered the Battle Frontier. Just in Canon, he's offered the chance to be a Frontier Brain. However, Ash declines this, saying that he still wishes to travel, and Brandon accepts this. At this point, things just like in Canon, then Ash and May has a final contest when they end up tying, and eventually everyone returns to their home. And when Ash gets to the lab, he once again runs into a rival Gary, who wishes to have a battle. The matchup is between Pikachu and Gary's newly evolved Electivire. However, with Pikachu being stronger than his Canon counterpart, is able to put it back far more effectively, and with the smoke clear, yes, it actually ends up in a tie. Gary compliments Ash on his growth before Gary returns to the scenery again, without deciding that is where his next journey is gonna take him. Deciding to leave all of his Pokemon at the lab, he eventually embarks on his next journey towards Sinnoh, to new adventures and new battles to be had. Ash's Sinnoh journey goes mostly just like it did in Canon, with he reuniting with Brock, as well as being a new traveling companion in Dawn. His team had gone no change at all as well, with he still having Pikachu, A-Bomb who's stuck aboard the ship when he left for Sinnoh, Staravia, Turtwig, as well as his new member, Chimchar. Just like when he was in Hoenn, he also helped his newer Pokemon train in order to help them catch up to his more experienced ones, which in turn allowed them to be able to get his first 3 gym badges a bit easier than this time than in Canon. Brock's team is entirely the same, with him still having Sudowoodo, Croagunk, as well as Apini, and Dawn also the same Pokemon of Piplup, Baneri, Pachirisu, and Weasel. However, the thing that worries at the most is Chimchar, having recently abandoned by Paul, as well as learning about his path when he was attacked and traumatized by a bunch of Zangoose, and wanted to help him to get better, but he also experienced with another Pokemon who has experience in being scared and traumatized. So he called Professor Oak and telling about it. Professor Oak recommends that having Tyranitar come over for a bit so he can share his experience with Chimchar in order to help it heal. While there is not the exact same trauma Tyranitar went through, having Chimchar talk to someone who understands that being scared might help it get better. So with that, I decided to bring over his old friend Tyranitar, and Dawn is completely surprised to see Ash having such a powerful Pokemon, and Chimchar and Tyranitar immediately start talking, and Tyranitar shares his own experience about being scared, as well as helping Chimchar get over his trauma. As the two talk more, Chimchar starts to look up to Tyranitar as sort of a big brother, and in turn, Tyranitar sees Chimchar as a smaller brother, which in turn leads to their friendship becoming quite strong quickly. However, things changes when Ash and Dawn decide to make a trade, so Dawn gets A-Palm and Ash getting Weasel. This immediately puts Weasel on the same team as Tyranitar, since in this timeline, with Ash having become a trainer who won a Pokemon League and taking on Elite Four members, he's more recognizable to trainers like Cynthia and Lucian. So when the gang met them, both of them talking about how Ash was an Elite 4 level trainer, and about the battle he had against the whole Elite 4. And one name Weasel distinctly remember is Tyranitar. And now, facing with the Pokemon who took on Elite 4 level trainers, Weasel can hold it back and decide to challenge Tyranitar to battle. Tyranitar having a more defensive style countered with Weasel's more hitting hard and attacking fast style. However, it allows Weasel to push health, but also practicing its defending since Tyranitar's power is not to mess around with. As the journey continues, however, Ash eventually makes a new friend in a Gligar. However, since his team is not considered of more than 6 Pokemon, he decides to do some bit of rotating, sending Staravia to the lab a bit so he can learn a bit from Ash's Swallow and Noctowl. Gligar's addition to the group, however, is sitting with Tyranitar, since Tyranitar can recognize itself in Gligar. Once upon a time, being a small shy grunt of itself, it started helping Gligar gain some confidence. And with that, Tyranitar, Shimshar, and Gligar form a bit of a trio, all helping each other to improve. Tyranitar's team at the older brother figure, while Shimshar and Gligar are sort of like the little sibling. But they're all in good fun, and they're getting along very well. Other than this, however, things go just like in canon, with Dawn having a contest with a newly evolved Envipom, but end up losing, kinda impeding her losing streak here. But eventually, the gang reached the Veilstone City, where Ash will have a next gym battle against gym leader Maylene. However, it's not Ash to take on the first gym battle, but actually Dawn. With Maylene's confidence being a bit shattered after a battle with Paul, Dawn decides to take on her first in order to boost her confidence. This one goes just like they did in canon, but one noticeable difference is that Envipom actually performed way better in this timeline, since it was put under Ash's training in order to help it catch up to Ash's more experienced Pokemon, but that experience carried over to now when it is with Dawn. Dawn still ends up doing better in this timeline, so soon enough, it's time for Ash to take up his gym battle against Maylene. However, this gym battle goes mostly the same, with them leading with Marshall against Staravia, with Staravia getting the win, then followed by Meditite, and because of confusion, Ash falls into Shimshar, who also get confused before sending Staravia back in, who finished Medicine off with the Brave Bird. Next is Lucario, who is able to defeat Staravia, as well as Shimshar, leaving only one Pokemon left, Weasel. Just like in canon, he learns a new move in Water Pulse. However, with the amount of training after Pokemon are used in order to catch up with his more experienced one, as well as all the battles Weasel had with Tyranitar, not only did the Shimshar able to do some more damage on Lucario, but Weasel now has enough power to actually defeat Lucario, meaning they are not ending up in a tie. The following adventure goes just like in canon, with Ash in the game facing off and defeating Team Galactic in Veilstone City, as well as meeting a Pokemon Ranger who's escorting a lost Riolu back to his home. Throughout this adventure, the one who is most eager to protect Riolu is none other than Tyranitar. Having also been forcefully removed from his home when he was young, Tyranitar understands what Riolu is going through and is promised to protect them. This also has an impact when Hunter J shows up in order to capture Riolu. However, upon seeing Tyranitar as well, she also wishes to capture it as well. However, Tyranitar refuses to allow that to happen and immediately launches into a battle against Salamence. The clash of pseudocy epic, however, Tyranitar's rock typing allows it to get the upper hand, so eventually they are able to get Riolu back to his home safely, and now being protected by multiple rangers, Jay decided to abandon the deal in order to avoid being captured by the police. Eventually, the gang managed to reach Battle Lakefront in order for Dawn to complete in the Wallace Cup in order to get another ribbon. However, she's not the only one, because Ash is also going to enter with his Weasel, but also May, being reunited with her, since she is also here to compete. The entire gang thought to have a good time, and eventually Ash, Dawn, and May all compete in the Wallace Cup. However, unlike in canon, with Weasel having done some sparring against Tyranitar, Ash and Weasel are grown strong enough so they are able to get all the way to the semi-finals, where their next opponent is none other than Dawn. However, with Ash and Weasel's tendency to focus more on raw attack instead of appearance, they unfortunately falls, allowing Dawn to move on to the finals, where she faces up against May. And just like in canon, this is where Dawn is able to get the win, getting her second ribbon. Things mostly unfold the same for a while, until we get to the episode Shimshard. This is where Ash and the gang once again have a run with Paul. However, when Paul looks at Ash, it's a different look than he usually gets, because in this timeline, when he learned about Ash having been able to win a Pokemon League and face against at least 4 members, he recognized Ash as a strong trainer, but still sees Ash as a way of being friendly with Pokemon as a weak way of going to get stronger. However, when Paul looks around, Tyranitar immediately catches his eye, having watched some matches previously in his 4 battles in order to see how good he really was. He recognizes the Tyranitar as one of them. Paul then immediately demands to battle Tyranitar. However, Ash refused unless he agreed to a free one-on-one matchup. Agreeing to his terms, the two will then have 3 one-on-one matches, and first off is Gligar versus Gliscor. Just like in canon, Gligar is eventually defeated. However, having gained confidence from Tyranitar, it does not feel too bad about the slot, and is able to take it way better. Next, Paul sends in Ursaring as Ash could with Shimshar. Both of them to the best. However, Ursaring's power is too much and is able to push Shimshar on the back foot. However, just then, that is the moment where Shimshar's Blaze activates, and unleashing a flurry of flame wheels is able to take down Ursaring. However, Shimshar is still out of control. It can't even hear anyone else. However, both Ash and Tyranitar are just out to it, and as Shimshar turns to them, the two people who have been trying to help overcome his trauma, Shimshar is able to get some form of conscience back before able to get out of Blaze. Paul questions that why he would do that. Why would he get Shimshar out of Blaze when he finally had acted? Ash said that Shimshar already won the battle and he's not going to push it to the worst. Paul doesn't like hearing that. However, now it's time for the final matchup. As Ash sends in Tyranitar, Paul counters with Torterra. The two immediately launch into a battle of power, both hitting each other with extremely powerful moves. While Torterra had the type advantage, Tyranitar's incredible defense allows it to take most of those attacks. However, Torterra is a defensive Pokemon on his own, and is able to take a lot of Tyranitar's attack. So the match in the end determines who had the best defense. However, there's one thing that is a big difference. Because unlike when Torterra takes any hit, because of Tyranitar's iron defense, its defensive power only rises. Meaning when Torterra runs his attack, it eventually does less and less damage, and in the end, the two of them charge into their final attack, with Torterra uses Frenzy Plants and Tyranitar uses Rock Slide. It seemed to be even. However, in the end, Tyranitar barely stands on one leg, while Torterra has fallen down, giving Ash his first official win against Paul. Paul simply scoffs, deciding to walk away right away, but recognizing Tyranitar's power, promising himself that next time he faces it, he's not going to lose. At this point, however, where the journey mostly continues as it did in canon, eventually the gang reached Pastoria City, and soon enough, Ash will have his next gym battle against Crasher Wake. The battle is a 3-on-3, and first out is Pikachu versus Gyarados, and just like in canon, Pikachu wins with a Volt Tackle. Next is Turtwig versus Quagsire. However, being stronger in this timeline, Turtwig has enough power to take all of Quagsire's Ice Beam and Flash Bomb, and is able to finish her off with an Energy Ball. Next is Floatzel, and I decided to send in Buizel, but due to being confused by some water pulse, it unfortunately forced the actors within the Pikachu again, but when Buizel eventually steps out of it, it's allowed to come back in and eventually finish off Floatzel, meaning Ash gets his 4th gym badge. At this point, the journey continues like a canon. However, at this stage, Gligar has grown significantly stronger, having gained confidence from Tyranitar, but not only that, with both his brother figure using the move, Gligar has also started adapting it and has been able to master the move Dig. Eventually, they can run into Gary once again, and this time around, instead of trying to encourage his Gligar's confidence, Gary can see how strong Gligar is and offer to have a battle with him. And if he can win, he will give him a Razor Fang to evolve his Gligar. Ash is eager to accept, and with that, the battle begins, and it's Ash's Gligar versus Gary's Umbreon. However, using Dig to strike hard as well as dodging attack, followed by X-Zero to land super effective damage, Umbreon is taking a severe beating, and eventually he is able to get the win, meaning as soon as night falls, Ash offers Gligar to Razor Fang and evolves into Gliscor. However, while this moment brings joy, it is also followed by somewhat sorrow. At this stage, Shimshar has matured a bit, and Gliscor is no longer the timid ground type it once were. So with that, Tyranitar sees that it is no longer needed here directly. It will still be there when they need him, but he believes it's time for Ash to return into the lab so he can focus more on his newer Pokemon. Ash understands how Tyranitar feels, and promise Shimshar and Gliscor that they can easily contact and even send them to the lab so they're getting out. So with that, Tyranitar takes a bit of a rest at the lab as the journey for the Sinnoh region continues. At this stage, things go just like in canon, with the game meeting Fantina and Ash having a quick battle with her only to lose, Dawn having another contest with Amiibo which she ending up winning, then having a run anything Galactic in Solosis Town, followed by another meetup with Paul. Just like in canon, the two have a battle with Turtwig and Honchkrow, leading to Turtwig evolving, but unfortunately losing the battle. The following night, however, Grotto actually gets some training tips from Paul Torterra. And in this time, however, having had experience training a fast Pokemon that now have evolved into a slow-burst bulkier form with Tyranitar, Ash is able to effectively train Grotto in order to learn how to adapt to his new body. And eventually, our game managed to get back to Haunton City, where they then have a meeting with Barry, who agreed to watch at a rematch against Fantina. However, not choosing to rely on one Pokemon, when Fantina goes in with Gengar, Ash switches into Gliscor. With this, Gliscor is able to stay on top of Gengar, but when Gengar attempted to use Hypnosis, Ash had Gliscor spin around by using an X-Scissor, similar to how Lucia did in the XY anime, allowing to cut through the Psychic type move as Hypnosis, allowing it to cut through and striking Gengar before it's followed up with a Steel Wing, taking it out. Next is Magius, and Ash goes with Chimchar, and using Counter Shield is able to defeat it, meaning continues down to our last Pokemon, Driplim. Ash goes in with Pikachu, however, just like in Cannon, Pikachu unfortunately falls, so Ash switches into Gliscor, having the ability to fly after Driplim, give it the good advantage, as well as using Ditch to avoid ominous winds. However, eventually Driplim able to catch Gliscor with a Psychic, allowing it to land on Hypnosis before an ominous wind smashes Gliscor into the ground, knocking it out. Meaning our last Pokemon is Chimchar. However, just like in Cannon, Chimchar is able to defeat Driplim, meaning Ash gets his 5th gym badge. Nothing really changed at this point, with the game reaching Canada City, where Ash will have his next gym battle against Byron, and after a bit of family drama with his son Roar, Byron agrees to the challenge. Byron immediately starts by sending in Bronzor, however, Ash counters with Buizel. Realizing that his Rain Dance will not be a good move here, Byron continuously used the Shadow Ball as well as Confusions. However, Buizel's speed with Aqua Jet, as well as followed up Water Pulses and Sonic Booms, forced the Bronzor on the edge before a follow-up Water Gun is enough to take it out. Next is Steelix, and Buizel pushes through with all he has. However, it's not enough, and eventually, Clean Land of Iron Tail knocks out Weasel. Ash then decided to go in with Grotto, deciding to employ his new defense strategy in order to get the win. Byron laughs at it, believing that his defense is stronger. However, Grotto has something Steelix does not: recovery. Whenever Grotto gets low, it uses Sympathy to keep itself healthy. However, Byron's use of Screech forces Grotto on the back foot. However, Adam sees an opportunity. So when Steelix deploys another Screech, Ash has Grotto fire up an energy ball, aiming it directly towards Steelix's mouth. This works in the end, as the move lands into the mouth, causing internal explosion, which severely weakens Steelix, allowing Grotto to fire up another energy ball, which lands, knocking out Steelix. Meaning Byron's last Pokemon is Bastiodon. However, Grotto had used too much energy and is eventually taken out. Meaning Ash's last Pokemon is Gliscor. However, just like in Cannon, is able to do enough damage to take down Bastiodon, meaning Ash gets his 6th gym badge. After this, it goes a long stretch of Cannon from here, with Ash and Jane getting to Iron Island to stop Team Galactic, Dawn winning another contest ribbon, Ash facing a Paul in a Poké Ring match, leading to Staravia evolving into Staraptor. However, we have a bit of a change when Team Rocket attempts to capture a Snover that the gang had modeled with during the day. Having now adapted a far more patient and standing style of battling, instead of rock climbing, when Grotto slams his front leg into the ground, it actually unleashes the new move, Earth Power, adapting to attacking from a distance while staying strong and any up-close physical attacks. After that, we have another Treasure Cannon, with Dawn having another contest, which she unfortunately loses, and deciding to allow Amy to pursue his real path in Pokemon Ping Pong. So with that, our game managed to get to Snow Point City, where Ash will get to have his first match against the Arctic Gym Leader, Candace. Candace starts by sending out Sneasel and Ashko with Buizel. It's immediately a battle of speed. However, using Sneasel's Ice Move to his advantage, Buizel is able to counter up an Ice Aqua Jet, which allows it to strike Sneasel hard before a follow of Sonic Boom is enough to take it out. Next is Medicine, and Ash switches into Staraptor, who is able to get the win using a cannon. And then they decide to switch again, going to the next Pokemon, Snover and Gliscor. In this time, however, with the amount of training Gliscor had done, it's able to push through Snover's attack. However, when it goes in for a Fire Fang, Snover uses the opportunity to land a Blizzard, which fortunately hit. However, with Gliscor already diving, it's able to get close and land the Fire Fang, and when it ends, it results in a double knockout. Next is a Abomasnow, and Ash sends in Staraptor in order to land a quick aerial ace. However, Abomasnow is able to fire for Blizzard, which immediately knocks it out. I then go with Weasel, and using its speed, is able to keep it at a distance for a bit, but unfortunately not enough, and Abomasnow lands a finishing blow on it as well, meaning Chimchar is the only one left. However, having the type advantage, it's able to get the win, meaning Ash officially earned his 7th gym badge. However, everything is not just happy and all, because the gang eventually meet up with Paul again. However, it then becomes good again, as the gang have a reunion with Paul's brother Reggie, as well as meeting the Pyramid King Brandon. After Paul challenges him to a battle, which he can quickly lose it, Reggie suggested that Ash and Paul agree to a full 6-on-6 battle. Both of the boys agreed to it, and with that, they decided to have it at Lake Acuity. It doesn't go so quickly, however, because eventually the game running into 100J at a small temple, and after a quick eventual battle, Ren is able to befriend Regigigas and is eventually able to before 100J back. And not long later, the game gets to Lake Acuity, and with Dizzy, Paul and Reggie are already there. And with that, the full 6-on-6 battle between Ash and Paul begins. Just like in canon, it's starting out with Paul using Torterra and Ash sending in Weasel first, before returning it and sending in Gliscor, wanting to preserve Weasel for later. However, this time around, with Gliscor having done more training and now using Dig as an evasion move, it's able to deliver several super effective X-Sister and 5 things onto Torterra, forcing it on the back foot. This extra damage is enough, so Paul decides that he wants to preserve Torterra, so he returns it and sends in Weavile. However, Ash decides he's gonna return as well, and sending in Staraptor instead. Paul not understanding why he's sending in another flying type, but decided to take the opportunity and have Weavile attack with a flurry of Ice Beam and Blizzard. However, the Raptor's quick moves and powerful close combat is enough, and just like in canon, it is able to take down Weavile. Next, Paul sends in Electabuzz and Ash goes in with Grotto. However, Electabuzz only set up a light screen before switching into Honchkrow. Just like in canon, Honchkrow is able to take down Grotto. However, Grotto's defense battling style is a perfect counter and is able to do severe damage to Honchkrow before falling down. Ash then decides to send in Pikachu as Paul goes in with Magmortar. Just like in canon, Pikachu is able to lay into Magmortar hard, but is eventually affected by Flame Body in the process. So Ash switches into Weasel, and Paul decides to send in Ursaring. The match is a battle between power and speed. However, just like in canon, Ursaring power is too much and Weasel falls. Ash then decides to send in Staraptor again. However, with Weasel be able to put in more damage to Ursaring, and Staraptor not having taken a super effective Stone previously, so when Ursaring is about to deliver the finishing hammer, Staraptor counters with a close combat. So while Staraptor takes 2 massive arm smashes down, Ursaring get a clawed feet right in his face, and in the end, both of them falls down, meaning Ash is down to 3 Pokemon, while Paul still has 4. Paul immediately sends an Electabuzz as Ash goes in with Gliscor. However, Electabuzz simply uses Light Screen again before switching into Torterra. Gliscor immediately goes on the offensive, wishing to finish what he started. However, Torterra's tanky nature allows it to take any attack, and 5 X's are fortunately not enough, so Torterra then immediately fires off a frenzy plant, which is enough, and Gliscor inevitably falls. With that, I decided to finally send in Chimchar. However, the amount of time that Gliscor battled Torterra was enough for finally Light Screen to wear off, allowing Chimchar to attack with Flamethrower at a distance, and with the damage Torterra already taken, it's not long enough for Chimchar to rush in with a Flame Wheel, striking him square in the head, which is enough, and Torterra falls. Meaning, Paul is down now to 3 Pokemon. However, he remains calm, knowing that Ash still only have a Chimchar and a burned Pikachu left. Paul then sent in Honchkrow, as Ash decided to send in Pikachu again, and while it's burned, it's still able to use its quick attack to get out of the battlefield and Thunderbolt whenever Honchkrow at a distance. In the end, the two of them launch into a collision of Sky Attack and Volt Tackle, and even with the burn, Pikachu is able to just push through, getting the win. However, at this point, Pikachu is fairly exhausted, so Magmortar comes in once again, and a quick Flamethrower is enough, and Pikachu is defeated. Meaning the last Pokemon is Chimchar, and immediately the 2 fire types launch into an epic duel, both hunting flamethrowers and trying to hit each other as much as they can. However, Magmortar's size allows it to get the upper hand in most categories, and a couple of super effective rock tombs causes Chimchar to falter for a bit. However, with that, all of a sudden, it actually starts igniting Blaze. Chimchar immediately lays into Magmortar, striking with flamethrowers and flame wheel, who is delivering fearsome blows. However, when he heard Ash's voice, he immediately starts to focus himself, getting some form of control over Blaze. So when Magmortar immediately starts to swing into another rock tomb, Chimchar uses a dig to dodge it before striking hard from below, before a flamethrower to the face is enough, and Magmortar falls. That is just what I needed, and with that, the Blaze-infused Chimchar evolves into a powerful Monferno. With that, Paul is now down to his last Pokemon, Electabuzz. The two of them immediately launch into a fearsome clash, with Monferno E using his new move Mach Punch to striking Electabuzz hard. However, this is where Electabuzz has the upper hand because it actually hasn't battled much, It only been in the battle a few times, only to set up light screen and not actually attacking. That is actually enough to take most of Monferno's hits. Someone to have the final clash is the one who stands, and Paul is the winner of the battle. As he's sad, however, he's happy that all of his Pokemon was able to perform so well. Paul, on the other hand, is conflicted. He came up with a great strategy, which he believed been able to completely defeat any of all active Pokemon. However, his entire team was almost defeated, and even Shimshar seemed to have gained some form of control of Blaze, which he was never able to do while he was under Paul, and even evolved. Paul decided to lead the battle. However, he thought to feel like that maybe Ash's battle's way had maybe some merit. Since Ash actually got along far better in this timeline, he does not have a sulking or so eventually the king is able to get back on the road again. Things at this point goes just like in canon, with eventually the king getting to Twin Lake Town to join this Wheelie Festival, where the king meets Barrett's father Palmer, and Ash having a battle with him using Grotle against Palmer's Rhyperior. Grotle still on the losing, however, Ash is able to do well. Next, they enjoy a bit of a Johto festival where Dawn gets herself a Cyndaquil until she competes in another contest against James the Sky at Jessie's alter ego. She ends up losing that, however. She is not too sad about it, and eventually we have the final clash against Team Galactic, where Ash and the gang is able to stop Team Galactic's goal of creating a new universe. Eventually, we get to the valley where Ash and the gang meet the Wind Battle Master. However, having grown far stronger and more confident, Gliscor is able to push through it all and is eventually able to get the win against this sword on the first try. So that means Gliscor doesn't take a run in the valley, meaning it sticks with Ash. However, eventually, Ash and the gang run into a Gibble, which immediately started liking Ash, becoming a newest member of his team. However, having now a team of 7 Pokemon again, Ash does some rotation in order to pull up the speed a bit, but Gibble is not the only one growing stronger, because in the episode where Ash faces against the trainer with the Mr. Mime and Weasel learns Ice Punch, in this timeline, having battle against Larvitar and help improve, it actually becomes just enough for Weasel to evolve into Float Soul. So, not only getting a fully mastered of his Ice Punch, and is able to get the win far easier. After this, Dawn has another contest where she's able to win with Syndicate and Mamoswine, not having enough ribbon to qualify her for the Grand Festival. Eventually, they can reunite with Barry again, and they decide to have a battle with Barry's opponent, which is Ash Monferno. Unfortunately, the attack forces Monferno to fall back a bit before Team Rocket shows up, but that's when Monferno returns and goes by Blaze. Ash gets out to Monferno to get together, and getting some help of his sanity back, is able to use the Flame of Blade to engulf itself before emerging as Infernape. Infernape is able to defeat Team Rocket, and eventually the gang reaches Sunshore City, where Ash will have his next gym battle. However, with Volkman not feeling for it, Ash instead battle against the Elite Four member Flint. In this timeline, however, things go way differently. With Ash now having a much stronger team, as well as the evolved Float Flow, they are able to push Flint in far just enough. So when Pikachu and Infernape have their final clash, it actually results in a double knockout. While he's not ready yet to take on Flint in a full match, he was still able to defeat Flint's stronger Pokemon, and this gives Volkner his try back, so he eventually is ready to take on his challenge against Ash. However, they cannot do that because Team Rocket decides to cause problem again. However, when Ash stops them with Grotto, it is not to allow it to evolve into Torterra. However, since the gene gets damaged in the process, they need to wait for a bit, but this allows Dawn to complete in the Grand Festival. However, this goes pretty much just like it did in canon, and eventually they can return to Sunshore City, where Ash will finally have a gym battle against Volkner. Just like in canon, this matchup starting off with Electivire versus Torterra. However, having no need in order to getting close to attack, Ash had Torterra immediately into a flurry of Energy Ball, Leaf Storms, and Earth Power. And Electivire, only able to attack Super Effective up close, tried to rush in. However, Torterra used the opportunity to fire off powerful energy balls and Leaf Storm to push it back. When it seemed Torterra started to run low on energy, Ash called for a Sim Visit in order to heal himself. However, Volkner take the opportunity to rush in close to deliver an Ice Punch. However, that is what Ash wanted, so just when Torterra finished healing, it raised their foreleg, immediately unleashed an Earth Power on the now closest Electivire. And while the Ice Punch lands, the Earth Power also strikes, and when the dust clears, Torterra is weakened, where Electivire is taken down. Volkner immediately then goes in with his next Pokemon Jolteon, and using his speed, is able to immediately fire off multiple Shadow Ball, before Torterra has enough time to heal itself or attack back. And in the end, that is enough, and Torterra falls, evening up the match. Ash then decides to send in Gibble, deciding to allow his newest character to get a chance. Jolteon's speed is not to mess around with, however, Gibble is also fast by going underground using Dig. This allows her to land several heavy hits, and when the two of them start to fire off a Shower Pole and a Dragon Pole, both moves seem to land on the target. However, while Gibble is dazed, Jolteon is taken out. Seeing that the power of the Dragon Pole and the Concealed Dig were too much for it, meaning Voldemort is down to his last Pokemon, Luxray. Immediately, Luxray rushes in with an Iron Tail, which is enough, and Gibble is taken down. Meaning Ash's last Pokemon is Infernape, and just like a cannon, it gets a mastery of its blaze, and a finishing Flame Wheel is enough to take down Luxray, meaning Ash has officially earned all of his gym badges. Not long after that, the game managed to get to Lily of the Valley in order for her to compete in the Lily of the Valley Conference. However, this is not really much I can actually alter the storyline from here. Most of Ash's matchup at this point go the same until we get to the top 8, where his next matchup is against Paul. The first matchup goes pretty much the same, with first being Pikachu against Aggron, but then Ash switched into Infernape, who was able to take it out. Then Paul sent in Gastrodon, and Ash switched into Staraptor, who needed to get switched out again. So Ash switched into Floatzel, who's able to take it out, but then Paul sent in Drapion. Drapion's power is immediately apparent, and after they set up a Toxic Spike, immediately finish up Floatzel not much after. Ash decided then to send in Torterra, and now with the super effective Earth power in his hand, it's able to do a lot of damage to Drapion. However, Paul also have a different problem. Drapion can only attack up close. The only way he can attack at a distance is with Pin Missile. However, Torterra can easily use a Leaf Storm to stop it. However, the poison starts to chip away at it, but Torterra's use of Symbiosis keep it healthy enough. However, Drapion shows up with incredible speed and rushes in, delivering a powerful cross poison up close, which does a lot of damage, but Torterra is able to fire off an Earth power again, but at that point, the poison caught up to it and Torterra falls. However, with the amount of damage Drapion has taken, when Ash switches into Staraptor, Paul switches out and sends in Ninja. Ninja's speed allows it to quickly outpace the Raptor, however it refuses to go down. And when Staraptor had to use its own speed in air lane, it's able to attack. However, with the Raptor's overwhelming power, when he's trying to go in with the fully stacked Beautycat, which I shot up for a while, Ash countered with a Brave Bird. When the two moves collide, the Raptor is taking out a lot of damage, however, Ninja is taken out, meaning Ash is now in the lead. However, Paul then switches in Frostlass. Using its trick coverage and because of its no-plug ability, is able to keep at a distance and eventually fire off a powerful Ice Beam which take out the Raptor. After switching into Infernape, before it unleashes a Dig, confusing Paul since that will not help when it comes to the head. However, that's when it unleashes an underground Flare Blitz just like in Cannon, getting rid of the Toxic Spike, and the overwhelming heat evaporates the hail. Infernape then bursts out of ground and delivers a mighty Flamethrower, and the amount of heat is a lot, so he put him able to go in for another Dig, this one landing before falling off with a second Flamethrower, knocking out Frostlass. Paul decided to send in Drapion again, however that's when Ash decided to switch into Gliscor. This matchup goes mostly just like it did in Cannon. Eventually Gliscor landing a finishing Dig which takes out Drapion, leaving Paul with only one Pokemon left, Electivire. For the most part, Gliscor has taken less damage at this time, so it's able to perform way better. However, Electivire is able to knock it out eventually, so Ash is now down to 2 Pokemon. That's when Pikachu comes back in, and now having battled that much, is able to push through far easily. However, Electivire's power is no joke, and is eventually taken down, but has been able to do a bit more damage than it can. Meaning Ash's last Pokemon is Infernape, and this matchup goes just like in Cannon, Infernape activating Blade before delivering a finishing move of Flare Blitz. That knocks out Paul out of the tournament, and officially putting the rivalry to bed. So when Ash moves on to the top 4, his next opponent is none other than Tobias. This matchup goes pretty much just like it is in Cannon, with Tobias' Darkrai be able to take both Heracross and Torkoal. However, Sceptile is able to come in and finish it off. However, then next comes Latios in, who is able to quickly take care of Sceptile, as Ashton sent in his next Pokemon Swallow, and unfortunately taken down as well, as Ashton goes in with his next Pokemon, Tyranitar, with his defensive strategy and his dark type moving Crunch is able to actually put in a lot of damage. So when Larvitar tried to go in with a finishing getting an impact, Tyranitar is able to take it with an Iron Defense before finishing it off with a Crunch. Meaning, Ash was officially beaten 2 out of his Pokemon. However, since we not know any of the Pokemon he has, we can only assume. We know most of his other Pokemon, assume that he's gonna have a team of Legendary. So next, Tobias decides to send in the Electric Bird of Kanto, Zapdos. Sadly, with the amount of damage Tyranitar already taken, it taken on quickly, meaning Ash's last Pokemon is Pikachu. And while Pikachu definitely has the power, it does not have the power to completely out-rival a legendary electric type. But it can do the next big thing, so when they're ending the battle in a finishing Thunderbolt clash, it ends in a draw, meaning Ash get eliminated in top 4, but have been able to go further against Tobias than in Ganon. At this point, however, everything mostly unfolded in Ganon, with Ash returning home to Pallet Town, Brock deciding to become a Pokemon doctor, and Dawn staying behind in order to think of her next journey. So when Ash returned to Pallet Town and see all of his Pokemon, he can't help but to smile to think how far he has come, as well as how far Tyranitar come from the small Larvitar it once were. From a small, scared ground type to now a mighty and powerful super legendary friend and mentor. And that was the complete story of what if Larvitar joined Ash's team. I really hope you enjoyed the story as much as I have making it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next What If. Bye!